The story originates in an extremely luxurious place. A lot of richly dressed people gathered in one place. They all clapped their hands and laughed as they watched. The guy in the blue cloak bowed to the king who was sitting on the throne. The ruler turned to Kahil, his son, who was the 17th prince. He said that today was his 15th birthday. The king said that the guy had already become an adult, and to celebrate this day, he would grant him his own domain. He stated that Heal should go to this earth and heal it on his own, and so began the rather long and difficult journey of the young Heal. After packing up, he boarded a boat, on which he headed to his new territory. The guy looked at it in amazement, thinking that someone seemed to be joking with him. Hill was really horrified when he saw it. It was Sheol Reef. It takes 10 days to row a boat to get to the capital, and there aren't even pirates living there. There is no question of merchants, because this island was too far from the capital. This island was more like just a big rock. Suddenly, he turned to the side where he saw a ship that was leaving very quickly. Heal looked at him in amazement, trying to figure out if they weren't even going to make sure that he swam to the island in one piece. Now it was his duty. The domain of the 17th prince of the kingdom of Sanphalis. He swam closer and closer, noticing that there was not even a beach there. Heal didn't know where he could dock. At the same time, the 11th Prince Valpus smiled smugly, after which he declared that this reef was just perfect for Hill. The 9th princess covered her face with a fan, after which she said that Senior Reef sounded interesting. Heal really doesn't have very good abilities, which could be called bad, but there is another reason why everyone laughs at him. Coat of arms. Every person is born with a coat of arms. His brothers have strong and beautiful coats of arms, for example, God of the Sword and King of the Sword, and, accordingly, a force equal to their coats of arms. Now they could be compared to the coat of arms of Heal. It was an unknown coat of arms, whose meaning they cannot understand to this day. It didn't make sense how much Heal worked on himself, because he couldn't activate his coat of arms in any way. His father and brothers were outraged by this situation, as Heal was bringing shame on the royal family. The guy awkwardly raised his head, after which he told his father that, with all due respect, he was interested in whether it was possible to send his representative there to manage the reef. The king sighed, after which he said that this was a task. The man waved his hand and declared that this was the word of the oracle. It could be considered that Hela was simply banished from the kingdom that day. They were banished to an unknown place, to some mountain of stones. He was already beginning to think that it would be better if he were executed for treason to the kingdom. The next moment he sighed, deciding that it was too early to think like that, and he was not ready to die. Suddenly, he noticed a good place where he might be able to dock. He needed to slow down the speed of the boat so as not to crash on the rocks. He sighed. The guy raised his hands, after which he deftly used wind magic. A small magic circle appeared in his hands. Despite the fact that he applied his strength, he could not create any special magic. The only thing it was enough for was the movement of a small feather that fell from a bird above. That was the real power of his magic. When wind magic is used, it should summon a strong gust of wind, but it does not work. He barely got there and went ashore, thinking that this was already a good start. The guy decided that he needed to move his stuff to a safer place. Heel saw the cave and decided to bring everything there, but he turned pale when he went inside. Inside the dark cave, he saw a lot of human bones and remains that lay at the bottom along with garbage and crates. The guy swallowed his saliva in horror as cold sweat flowed down his face. He looked at all the horror that was in the cave. After that, he immediately turned around, thinking that there was nothing else there, and he could hide the supplies there. So he did. After that, he sat on a box, and from the cave began to look at how calmly the waves were beating against the rocks. It was beautiful. The birds were making noise, and Heel thought that this was a wonderful place where he was far from the hustle and bustle, and everything would be better if the situation were a little different. Suddenly, he slapped himself in the face, thinking that he was going to survive there no matter what. After that, he decided that he needed to figure something out first. When a ship sails by, he will ask them for help, and the ship cannot be from his country, so there is only a foreign or pirate ship to choose from. But if so, at best he will become a servant. There are no trade routes there, and this reef is too far from the capital for anyone to fish there. Heel could not rely on his magic in any way, and therefore he needs to store rainwater and fish in barrels. He has enough food and water for a month at most. He opened the drawer, thinking that he had to clean up this cave. He also thought that he should bury the remains of those people. The guy took out a small pickaxe, thinking that he would try to dig with this tool. At that very moment, he received a notification that a mining tool had been received. He turned around, trying to figure out what it was. Hill gasped, thinking that it was like a voice in his head. He asked the unknown person to say something again. The words sounded in his head that he had received a mining tool, after which he was asked if he wanted to start mining. The guy was stunned, realizing that there was no doubt. He asked who it was. The voice said that it is the coat of arms of the king of the cave and plays the function of an advisor. He explained that he was not a living organism. The king of the cave is the coat of arms that Hill was born with, but it was unclear to him why he appeared now. Suddenly he thought about it and realized that it was connected with the cave. He exclaimed that he had always lived in the royal palace and had never even come close to the cave. Herb said that in addition to being an advisor, he enhances mining skills and provides support. Inside the cave, he can raise his level in different ways. Gil, startled, asked Herb to stop. He thought he didn't understand anything, but he wondered what would happen if he said he wanted to start mining. Immediately after that, Gerb agreed and said that he was starting to optimize production. Hill was a little confused and asked what it meant. The next moment, he walked up to the wall on which a bright glow appeared. Hill was very surprised. He asked what it was and why the wall was shining so brightly. Herb explained that the places where the white light shines are the most suitable for mining. Herb also said that the fossils would be easy to dig and there would be no risk of collapse. Hill thought about it and then decided from where he would start digging. He quickly struck with a pickaxe. At the same moment, a large substance fell out of the wall. Hill was surprised that it happened from a single blow. Everything was as the advisor had said. It was very bright there, even though he was in a cave, so Hill asked if this was one of the supporting effects. The advisor agreed and said it was a night vision effect. He rolled up his sleeves and said that everything was fine then, and now he should start by making room for himself to sleep. Extremely quickly, he began to destroy the walls of the cave with his pickaxe. He smiled, thinking that it was quite fun. After a while, the entire wall of the cave was broken, but Hill continued. Thus, he created a fairly large passage in the wall. In the process, he asked the advisor if the amount he could dig up at once was increasing. He noted that he had already dug up a lot of stones. Herb also reported that this amount that he can dig up increases along with mining skills. After these words, he noted that his abilities were still improving. Suddenly he slipped and almost fell. The counselor asked if Hill wanted to extract 168 stones. The guy was surprised and asked what to extract. The advisor said that it did not matter how much he could get, because the coat of arms of the king of the cave could store them in countless numbers. When asked where it goes, Gerb said he could not say. So Hill proceeded to even more quickly clear the area in his cave. The vault does not affect the guy's body in any way, and he can extract the excavated at any time. The guy said that he understood, after which he extracted 168 stones from his construction inventory. He was surprised. Looking at so many stones, he gasped in admiration. The advisor asked if Hill wanted to activate the automatic search. The guy immediately agreed. He was thinking that, with such incredible speed, he would soon get to the backside, and therefore he needed to dig deeper. The advisor said that the hill is 10 meters from the place from which he started. After hearing about meters, the guy noted that he had never heard of such a thing, and probably he should still know what 1 meter is. The guy got up and wiped his sweat. Before Hill could even look back, there was a whole bunch of stuff in his inventory. There were copper and bronze ores. The guy was surprised to see even gold ore, but he didn't need it on a desert island yet. Hill also noted that he did not know what magic ore was. Immediately after that, the advisor activated the mining guide. It was written there that the magic stone greatly increases the user's magic power. He also read that the larger the stone, the stronger the effect of increasing strength. He asked if this stone really increases magic power. The guy thought that this meant that even his pathetic magic would be stronger. Suddenly, he noticed the turtle stone in the inventory. He's had quite a few problems during this time. The manual said that after using the turtle stone, it can increase its lifespan by 1 day. Hill was genuinely amazed. The guy doesn't even have a clue what the King of the Cave is, but this coat of arms turned out to be just amazing, and this Sheol Reef turned out to be a very good possession for him. The guy with the big smile gripped the pickaxe tightly. After that, he rushed to extract resources again. He had completely forgotten about the idea of finding ships that could save him. He just kept digging and mining. In the blink of an eye, Hill reached a depth of 30 meters, and he had quite a lot in his inventory. What interested him the most was also in abundance. There were 90 magic stones, and there were 6 turtle stones. He was especially interested in the magic stone. He thought it would be nice if he could use more advanced magic. The counselor asked if the guy wanted to use a magic stone. Heel confidently agreed. That's how he spent all the magic stones he had. Right after that, Heel was left alone in an empty cave. He looked back and looked at himself, trying to feel the effect. After that, he laughed awkwardly and asked the advisor if he had already used magic stones. The coat of arms confirmed everything. The guy wondered if anything happens to the body when he uses a magic stone. He looked up, wanting to test his strength, as well as clear the path he had recently dug. Heel stretched out his hand, then called for the wind. At that very moment, a huge wind current swept through the entire cave, rising up. The strength of this wind was simply incredible. The wind currents completely demolished not only human remains, but also many of the stones that were there. All this has been swept to the surface. The guy froze, staring ahead in amazement. He couldn't believe what had just happened, and so he stared ahead in a stupor. He screamed loudly and asked in a panic if he had done it. Heel couldn't believe that 90 stones had raised his magic level so much. At that moment, the little creature started walking towards the guy. Heel turned around and saw something jump up quickly, then hit his face with all its force. The little slime stuck to the body of Heel, who was confused trying to figure out what it was in front of him. Heel sharpened his pickaxe extremely deftly, and also prepared all his belongings so that it would be more convenient for him to explore the cave. And so it had been 3 days since he, the 17th prince of the kingdom of Sanfalis, had been assigned, or rather exiled, to the Rocky Mountains known as the Sheol Reefs. After Heel finished, he deftly put his bag on his back, noting that he had collected all the tools, and the food was already with him. After that, he smiled broadly and looked down at someone. He turned to Shell, saying that they were about to start a new mining day. The little slime swayed, looking at the prince. Right after that, Heel climbed on the shell, and together they set off. This little slime's name was Shell, and he was Heel's very first companion on this island. 3 days ago, when the guy first discovered Shell, he asked in amazement what it was. The little slime kept jumping around the guy. Heel looked at him, then calmed down a little and said that he had read about it. He said it was slime, and then asked if he jumped out because the guy's wind magic scared him. At that very moment, the advisor notified Heel that the first tamed monster had been found. He asked if Heel wanted to tame him. The guy was confused. Taming is a skill that makes monsters follow him. However, Heel has never seen it used. He doesn't work for hostile monsters, and anyway, in the guy's kingdom, all monsters are just hated. However, something else was bothering him. He squeezed his hand and put it to his chest, saying that in this unusual place, no one would be able to condemn him for sure. The advisor said that in order to complete the taming process, the healer needs to name the monster. The guy thought deeply, after which he said that the monster came from Sheol Reef. After that, he started repeating the name of the reef. When he came up with something interesting, he exclaimed that the monster was now called Shell. The guy said he was very pleased to meet you. The advisor said that the naming was completed and the shell was tamed. It was obvious to Heel that the monster did not understand human speech, but having another living creature next to him made him feel better. The guy waved his hand and said it was time for them to continue. This was exactly what the prince had thought of in the first place. He turned around and looked at Shell with a smile. He called the monster to him. The next moment, the monster hardened a little and created a fairly high and comfortable platform under the hill. The prince was a little confused about this. Shell turned out to be surprisingly very smart. He agreed with the monster and said that now he could reach such a height. He thanked Slime. Heel used different gestures to tell the monster what he wanted. And precisely because of this, his mining business began to move much faster than before. In the last 3 days, the number of things he had dug up had tripled. He had used about 500 magic stones during that time. With his enhanced magic, food was no longer a problem. When the day came to an end, the guy lay down comfortably on Slime and sighed, saying that it was incredibly pleasant. He carefully guided Shell so that he lay down more comfortably. During this time, Heel found 10 more slimes while he was digging. Being honest, Heel didn't think it would be easy to communicate with them, and so he assumed that his shell was special. He looked up at the sky, saying that it wasn't so important to him as long as they didn't get in his way, so he was going to dig tomorrow. The guy's day began with Shell actively waking him up and pushing him in the face. Heel got up and wished his friend good morning, after which he asked why he was jumping. At that moment, Shell pointed somewhere. At that moment, Heel turned around and gasped in amazement when he saw that someone was on the shore. He immediately climbed on top of Shell and rushed forward, asking if these people were okay. When he got there, he noticed in horror that these strangers were bleeding. They were green-skinned goblins. The guy noticed that their boat had crashed on the rocks. Suddenly, one of them started moving, and the guy was confused when he saw that they were alive. Officially, humans and goblins were enemies. Most people will immediately think about killing goblins, just like goblins. Hill turned and looked at Shell. However, Heel was different. He told Slim that everything was fine, and he wouldn't feel good if he left those goblins there to die. Heel raised his hand and used recovery on them. When the guy had done all the important things, he picked up the goblins' bodies and, with the help of Shell, carried them into the cave. The guy covered them with blankets and left them to rest. Heel sighed, because now their lives were out of danger. The guy turned around and told Shell out of the corner of his eye that the monster would inform him if there were any changes in the condition of these goblins. He wondered if he was being too careless, because if they woke up and attacked him, it would be dangerous. However, he could use medium-level magic now, so he hoped that everything would be fine. He felt a little anxious. The guy gripped his pickaxe tightly in his hands, thinking that he would just dig. And thanks to this, he would calm down. He was hitting the rocks and walls of the cave with his tool more and more. He hit the stones extremely hard with the pickaxe again. He sighed, thinking that mining was wonderful, because it made him forget about everything else. He felt very good when he checked his inventory. The guy wondered if there were any new stones there. There he saw the Masogi stone and the Shining stone. One of them got rid of curses, and the other was glowing all the time. Heel noted this, however, he had night vision. There was also no one there who could curse him. He sighed, thinking that it was not so important, because it was still nice to find new things. Heel was about to return to the company when suddenly Shell came down to him. The guy turned to his pet in surprise, then looked up and asked if the goblin had woken up. He climbed on top of the shell, and together they went upstairs. Heel immediately heard the screams. Someone was shouting at the princess to let him go. The girl told the general to stop, because he can't just eat someone else's food. The third goblin agreed with the princess, saying that they should discuss everything. The next moment, the largest goblin of the three turned to Hill and asked who was there. The princess told the general to put down his weapon, because this man had saved them. The goblin exclaimed that he simply could not do it, because this man was dangerous. In a panic, Heel noticed that they spoke the same language, and he assumed that they were also from the Baleon continent. However, something was bothering him. He shouted that the goblin should stop, because the guy did not plan to do anything with them. The general ordered Heel to step back, because he simply could not trust a man. The guy immediately noted that he had a feeling that they were not hostile, but rather afraid of him. The general immediately said that this man was up to something, because otherwise he did not understand why Heel was mocking them. The guy froze, trying to figure out what it meant. He turned around and looked at Shell, who immediately stood up. He saw himself in Slime's reflection, after which he couldn't help but notice the fact that this guy looked incredibly dangerous. Heel began to panic, thinking that because he was so into digging, he had become something inhuman. He immediately apologized to them and said they could eat his food. He decided something and turned towards the water. Heel quickly used lightning to kill the fish and then collect it with the wind. He picked her up with a smile and said they should eat the fish he caught. The general was taken aback and asked why Heel didn't just kill them right away, since he could use such strong magic. He just told the guy to kill them quickly. At this time, the little princess called the general and asked why he decided everything so quickly. However, she couldn't finish the sentence. The girl fell at the goblin's feet, breathing heavily. Both goblins immediately rushed to the princess and began to scream loudly, trying to wake the girl up and bring her back to consciousness. Heel was very confused. The guy looked at the goblins in disbelief, who were drooping, and then asked if the girl's wounds had not completely healed. The old man paused, then said that this was not the case. Goblin revealed that their princess was cursed with a life-shortening curse. Heel immediately froze when he heard about the curse. The old man burst into tears and apologized to the general, saying that the time had come. The man also began to sob. They started talking about how they just couldn't let the princess die alone, and therefore they would follow her too. They declared that they would receive the punishment of the ancestors in another world. Hill, watching this, was amazed at the thought of what they had decided to do to themselves. He shouted loudly for them to stop. The guy quickly said that he might be able to extract the poison from her body. The general turned around and told the guy not to lie, because they had already tried everything. Heel said he hadn't used it before, but it's worth a try. The next moment, the guy took out one of the Masogi stones and used it on the princess. The girl immediately shone brightly, which greatly amazed the goblins. Heel thought about it and said that her life expectancy had also been reduced. He immediately spent 79 turtle stones on it and kept 10 for himself just in case. The general looked at the guy in amazement and asked what kind of light it was. Heel quickly reported that the Misogi stone had cured the girl's curse. The goblin looked at the guy and asked where he got this stone in the first place. Suddenly, someone's voice rang out. The general, Heel, and the old man looked at the girl in amazement, who got up and asked in disbelief what had happened. The princess said that she already thought she was dead. At the same moment, loud screams rang out in the room, followed by apologies. The general bowed low, hitting his head on the floor, and then apologized for what he had done. He also called Heel the savior of their princess. The goblin was very confused, because he did not know at all how he could apologize for his act. Heel smiled and built a fire, telling the others that they should go to him and eat something. He stated that they hadn't even met yet. The guy was also amazed that the general had punched the floor with his head. He thought goblins were scary. The general said again that he did not know how to apologize so that Heel would forgive him. He explained that he was General El Gablebel from the Bladen tribe. The princess said that her name was Ri, and she was the daughter of Rodan, the king of the Bladen tribe. The old man said that his name was Vali, and he was a shaman of the Bladen tribe. Heel said with a smile that his name was Heel, and he was the prince of the kingdom of Sanfalis, or he was. The general immediately exclaimed upon learning that the guy was a prince. He stated that it was now clear to him why Heel could use all that magic. The guy awkwardly said that everything was wrong, and it was thanks to the stones that he got here. After that, Heel said it wasn't that important. He asked why they were in this place. Upon hearing this question, they all froze. The general said heavily that their hometown had been burned to the ground by the orcs. Almost the entire ruling family was killed, and only Princess Ri was able to survive. They had been looking for a place to stay for the past year, but the other clans did not accept them, and the people, of course, drove them away. They and the other survivors have headed to a new world, but they don't even know if the others are safe. Vari spoke heavily about this dilapidated ship. Ri turned around and told the old man not to blame Al. She said that if they had stayed on land, their fate would have been the same. Vari turned around and said that the girl was right, after which he apologized to her. The girl turned to Hill with a smile, after which she sincerely thanked him for saving monsters like them. The guy froze when he heard how she addressed herself. Hill just said that everything was fine. Ri said that she already knows that she won't live long anyway, and yet, this pain in her chest has disappeared, and she is very glad that she can now die in peace. Vari and Al just smiled. Heel agreed, after which he confidently stated that it was too early to give up now. The guy told me that there are still turtle stones here, and there are a lot of them underground. They can extend the life of the reef for as long as they want, as long as they have these stones. The general asked in amazement if this was true. Hill explained that if he dug at this rate for a whole week, he might be able to get more than a year in the form of stones. Vari and Al immediately exchanged glances. The general said he was well aware that he was asking too much, but he would like to know if Hill would allow them to dig too. The guy was a little confused, but very easily agreed to it. Alpilla and Vari immediately fell to their knees, sincerely thanking the guy for this. The princess asked in confusion, why is he giving them something so precious? Hill explained that she shouldn't worry, because he only digs because he likes it, and he's also very lonely alone. Hearing this, Ri couldn't hold back her emotions and cried bitterly. The princess lowered her head and sincerely thanked the guy. He also thought that it was really a small matter, but he did not know what to do now. He has ice axes, but if they dig somewhere in a strange place, they may collapse. Suddenly, the advisor said that the guy can often grant blessings from his effects to the monsters that he tames. Of the related effects, he will get improved mining, increased experience, optimized digging. When they heard about the idea of domestication, they were very confused. Hill explained that this way they could dig together. He also added that they can refuse, because he does not insist. He will dig himself and give them as many stones as they need. Albiku immediately said that everything was wrong, and he and Vimari would serve him. However, he did not want the princess to be a part of it. Suddenly, Reed rushed forward and asked for the opportunity to serve the guy herself. The goblins were amazed. The girl said that she simply could not sit and let others work for her, because she also wanted to repay Heel somehow. The girl turned to him and asked him to give her a new name. The guy laughed awkwardly, thinking that she didn't need to worry so much about it. However, if she wanted to, she could always stop. From that day on, Al's name was Alvavin. The goblin said he would protect him from now on. Vari became Varus. He said he would be honored to serve Hill for as long as his age would allow. Rio was now called Rihanna. He asked the girl what she thought about it. She was delighted and said that she promised that Rihanna would offer him everything she had. They went underground after they finished eating. Hill thought that he just wanted to get back to mining. The guys were very surprised when the guy took out a torch. This item was in his inventory, and he explained that he would teach them while they were digging. Goblins didn't have night vision, so he made a simple stone torch. Varys was very surprised when he noticed that the cave was glowing in some places. Rihanna said it was very beautiful. Hill explained that these were places where it was safe to dig, and he would show them everything. After that, he quickly struck with a pickaxe. At the same moment, a huge area of the mountain cracked until it completely collapsed, collecting everything in Hill's inventory. When it was over, there was a hole in the wall. The goblins were genuinely amazed. Hill said he doesn't usually start like that, but when they get used to it, they can dig as well. He also said that the stones are not collected automatically. The guy turned to Shell and asked if he could give instructions to other slimes. He said that they need to try, because practice improves. The guys quickly agreed and got to work. Since that very day, the cave has become much more lively. A large number of people gathered in one place. They all threw Hill to the ground, after which he fell painfully. The aristocrats laughed at him and threatened the guy. Hill wanted this weakling to get out of his way. After that, he noted that this would apply to a large number of such people. They were all grinning, using magic to hurt the guy even more. He just stared at them in horror and wiped the blood from his face while the little creature hid behind him. The guy tightly clutched a small bottle of liquid, completely lost in his thoughts. Because of how much he was concentrating, the guy didn't even notice someone calling him for a long time. Hill looked up and looked at Rihanna, who was calling him. The girl anxiously asked him if everything was all right. Alvin also asked if it was possible that Hill was tired because he had already dug up a lot today. The guy tightly clutched the pendant with the bottle, after which he said that everything was wrong, and he just plunged deep into thought. Afterwards, he said that thanks to his king of the cave, he could dig all day without even getting tired of it. Rihanna looked at the guy, then sighed, and said that he really shouldn't work so hard. Hill agreed, after which he asked in surprise what it smelled so delicious. Rihanna quickly showed an extremely appetizing apple pie. The girl said that they would eat it today. Hill, Alvin, and Varys sighed in admiration. It's been 3 days since Hill met these goblins. They've already done a couple of things since then. The three of them made themselves a bathroom, a reservoir, as well as a fairly simple but comfortable kitchen. The guy took a small fork, then ate a piece of pie. He was thinking that thanks to this kitchen, he could eat the food that Rihanna was cooking. When the guy started chewing the pie, he gasped in amazement, which scared the girl. The next moment, Hill gripped the fork tightly in his hands and blushed slightly, saying that it was incredibly delicious. Rihanna sighed calmly, after which she noted that she was very glad that Hill liked her cooking. It was only thanks to Rihanna that all the products that Hill brought with him were not just cooked or baked, but turned into delicious food. Alvin raised his fork with a smile and said that he never would have thought that the prey could be so fun. Varys sighed and agreed, after which he said that it was all worth it because they were prolonging the life of their princess. Rihanna smiled warmly, then called Alvin, Varys, and Mr. Hill by name. She sincerely thanked them all for what they did for her during such a difficult time. As time passed, the situation gradually began to improve, but this did not negate the fact that the guy still had a whole bunch of different things to do. Hill didn't have the resources he needed. After all their firewood runs out, he can only rely on what he brought with him from the kingdom. There was no food on this island besides, and their clothes were gradually wearing out. Hill continued to dig, thinking that all this was unlikely. However, if a ship did appear, then they would have the opportunity to exchange emeralds for supplies. Suddenly he thought about it and said that everything was wrong. The guy could not have imagined that he would have the same worries as the real Lord of the Lands. Alvin was extremely reluctant to leave all the work to Hill. The guy said that they should rest. He continued to destroy the stones, saying that he just needed to dig. He wanted to get more turtle stones for Rihanna, and maybe even find some new stones. After Hill hit the rocks again, suddenly one of the walls collapsed, and the guy gasped in amazement. He looked at the open space in disbelief and asked if it was really a cave. He looked around, however. The entire cave was completely covered with some rocks that he had seen for the first time. He gasped and asked what kind of stones they were. Hill was amazed to see that they were as orange as the sunset itself. They were different from the shining stones. He stepped forward and found that there was earth on the floor. He asked why she was there. Suddenly, he heard a sound and raised his head. Right in front of him was a huge monster that looked like a giant spider. The insect hissed as Heel froze in a daze. Heel couldn't believe that there was a spider in front of him. It was huge, and the guy decided he was going to eat it, and he was going to die. He raised his hand and wanted to use magic, but the monster ran away extremely quickly, which amazed Heel. He looked inside, where he saw a lot of very small spiders. The guy gasped and apologized, realizing that it was a spider's nest. It became clear to him that it was protecting its children. Suddenly, he received a notification that a new tame monster had been found. At this time, Alvin was warming up when he suddenly heard Hilla. He was glad that the guy had changed his mind about working. Suddenly, they all froze, looking at the guy. Hill stared at them in disbelief while there was a huge spider behind him. The guys shouted loudly that there was something behind the hill. The guy smiled and apologized for scaring them. He explained that it was Taryn and her children who had just joined them. Varys gasped, saying that it was a cave spider. He could not have imagined that there was such a big one as a battering ram. Heel asked if they were smaller on the continent. Varys said they were usually the same as him. Their web is stronger than iron, and they have a very strong poison. They are very dangerous and also feed on humans and monsters. Hill was surprised when he found out about it. Heel said that in the past he had been told to be careful if there was earth in the cave. Varys explained that this is the land of cave spiders, hinting at food waste. He gasped and said he understood. He also explained that the floor of the cave where he found them was covered with it. Varys was a little surprised, but noted that this was good news. Varys explained that the spider thing is much better suited for growing crops than the earth. Hill gasped and said that then she was perfect for farming. Varys was thinking about where to grow crops on an island full of rocks. Hill said he wanted to show them something. He asked the guys to follow him to look at the tunnel. Inside, they saw a long staircase leading down. Rhaena asked where it came from. Heel also said that he had tried out the new functions of his coat of arms. He had raised the second rank, and therefore could now shape things during mining. It was easier for him to walk along this path than through an uneven tunnel. He also gained the ability to handle inventory. The trained monsters also had night vision now. Alvin said it looked like they would have more worries starting tomorrow. Varys agreed that they had a lot to do. Hill also asked what the guys thought about the welcome party for Taryn tomorrow. Rhaena agreed and said she wanted fried fish. And so the plan to change the island was approved. Alvin and Varys forged pickaxes. The old man didn't have enough knowledge to make the same ones as the original. Hill said that the creation of tools is already an achievement. Rhaena began to knit spiders from the web. She knitted good towels, and she could also make a futon. Hill appointed Taryn as the head of agriculture, and suddenly she had a new unexpected talent. She was incredibly fast at digging, and Hill noticed that even the king of the cave couldn't take her lightly. Then something happened. A small sprout appeared on their territory, which began to grow instantly until it turned into an apple tree. It happened in a matter of seconds. Heel did not think that the effect would be so significant. The orange stones they found in that cave turned out to be sunstones that accelerated the growth of living creatures. Varys assumed that was why the ram was so big. Heel couldn't find them in other places, so he should have taken care of the stones. The guy asked Rhaena if she was busy. He entrusted the sunstones and plantation planning to Rhaena. The girl wasn't sure if he really wanted to entrust it to her. She exclaimed that she would not let him down. He was worried that she was worrying too much, but because of that, he could trust her. He went underground and thanked Shell for the quick descent. Everyone does what they do best. Thanks to this, he could devote himself entirely to mining. His goal was to get as many turtle stones as possible. Rhaena already has 5 years of life, but she told him she was 15. Just like him, he was sure that she wanted to live a long life. He is the best earner, and therefore he has to work harder. Suddenly, he noticed an unfamiliar white stone and decided to dig it out first. Suddenly, he gasped in amazement. It was a dragon sphere capable of resurrecting the dead. He didn't believe it. Heel quickly called Tirana and the others to dig with him. However, they couldn't find any other dragon realms. He said it was understandable, and it would be very scary if they could resurrect everyone. He picked up the sphere and said that he would take it outside, because if he died, he would not be able to get it out of the inventory. Suddenly, he heard Alvin calling him. The guy asked what happened upstairs. He left the stone on the ledge for a while, then ran upstairs. At this time, a small stone rolled down. Alvin exclaimed that their clan ship was nearby. Hill ran out startled and asked if that was the case. Alvin pointed with his finger. One ship was restlessly staggering in the sea, which was sailing towards the guys. Hill saw and noted that they had all survived. Rhaena began to cry, saying that she already thought they were dead too. Alvin exclaimed that it was wonderful. because his daughter was there too. Heel said it would be dangerous for them to dock here, and therefore they should take their ship. Alvin agreed, and then asked if the guy was sure. Hill said he doesn't use it. After that, he handed them a bag of jewelry. The guy said they should take it as a parting gift. Thanks to this, they will be able to restore the Baldan clan wherever they want. Alvin asked Hill what he was saying. The guy asked in disbelief what was wrong, because their friends were on the ship. He stated that they should leave this remote place. He came up with the idea and offered them to bargain after they found a suitable place for the house, because it would be great if he could get things from outside. The goblins looked at each other in disbelief, trying to say something. Suddenly, Alvin exclaimed loudly, asking Heel not to leave them. They were not going to leave, and they went to the others so that the guys would also swear allegiance to Hill. They would never have left him. Rihanna agreed and said they were Hila's subordinates. The guy was shocked and said he appreciated it, but they wouldn't have another chance. Rihanna asked if Hill would like to go with them. The guy thought that he really had such a plan, but he was not ready to leave the island. Noticing this, Rihanna said that then they would stay too. Hill was surprised, and Varys and Alvin smiled. The guy thanked them. Suddenly they screamed, noticing that the ship was sinking. Most of the goblins couldn't swim. Rihanna rushed to the boat to save them. Hill saw that they were not in time, and that small boat could only accommodate a couple of people. It was bad, and there was nothing Hill could do. Remembering the pile of bodies on the island, he immediately rushed forward. He quickly jumped into the water. Upon seeing this, Alvin, Varys, and Rihanna panicked and called Hilla by name. Hill quickly jumped into the water, thinking that it was not hopeless, and he could do it. He remembered that he was the king of the cave. At that moment, he had spent 9,000 magic stones. He quickly used an ice spell. Extremely quickly, the ice spread forward, stopping the ship's fall as well. Varys, Alvin, and Rihanna were amazed. Hill was delighted. It was the power of 9,000 magic stones. He reached out and told Alvin to forget about the boat and just walk across the ice to save them. He accepted it and went forward, but quickly slipped off her. Hill realized that he had made a road, but it was all slippery. At that moment, someone else came forward. Taryn rushed forward carrying Hill on her back. The guy noted that it was easier to do this with her legs. At this time, small spiders were carrying goblins. Alvin thought that he had never treated spiders well, but now he has changed his mind. At that time, the slimes were also nearby. Hill shouted at Shell to do it with the other slimes. Everyone worked hard and put their strength into saving an entire goblin ship. Hill used magic while the others pulled the goblins out of the water. When it was over and everyone was on land, Hill used magic to heal the monster's wounds. Rihanna told Hill that, thanks to him, all 205 passengers of the ship were safe. Varys asked how they could pay him. The guy also noted that he was glad that everything was safe. Alvin was happily hugging little Fu because she was alive. The girl said it was awkward and asked her father to stop. Varys explained that Fu is the general's daughter. He said that Alvin looked very happy. Heel thought she looked more like her mother. Rihanna said that all the wounded feel better thanks to Heel's healing magic. She thanked the guy, and he just agreed. Heel said that he couldn't have done it alone. Taryn and spiders, Shell and slime, Rihanna, Elvin, and Varys, they all saved the Baldan tribe. He thanked them with a smile, because at that time he managed to save them. The guys were touched, and Varys said that the guy was too kind. Suddenly, he also asked who was behind the guy. Heel turned around and saw a middle-aged man he didn't recognize. The guy asked if the man was on the ship. Varys said that he had not received such a report, and he was wondering if Heel had met with any cave. The guy also hadn't seen him before. He also did not understand why the man was without clothes. Hill introduced himself in disbelief, and then asked who the man was. The stranger just turned away. He went to everyone and started eating. Rihanna assumed he was hungry and decided to cook more. Hill thanked her. Varys asked who it was. The guy thought about it, then said that they should just put it on. The next day they started working again. Hill said with a smile that this should definitely be enough, and they could bring everything in. In an instant, it turned into a dining room. Their population has increased by 205 people, and therefore Heel has prepared new rooms. He tamed everyone in the Baldan tribe. The circumstances might not have been the best, but he was genuinely glad that the island had become much more lively. However, the news was not only good. They found only a few supplies at the shipwreck site. Therefore, they are very busy increasing the production of necessities and tools. Rihanna brought Hill a drink and said that he had done a good job on the rooms. The guy thanked her and asked if the girl was okay. She said it was like that. The girl noted that she knows that this is unexpected, but Hailu should try it. Heel drank the drink, after which he happily noticed that it was grapes. Rihanna said she used a sunstone on a grapeseed she found in the boat. The guy said it was wonderful. He never thought he would drink fresh juice there. Rihanna said it was still a small plantation, but in a few years it would be full of fruits. Upon hearing this, Heel praised her, because she is already thinking about the future. He said he was sure she could handle it. Heel also said that if she needs help, she can always tell. The girl said she would do everything in her power. At this time, the goblins shouted at the man, asking what he wanted. They said all he does is watch. The goblin told Mappa to bother someone else. Hill recognized the old man with no clothes in the map. Rihanna agreed and said that's what everyone calls him. Mappa looked at the tools and spread his arms. Goblin put the hammer in Mappa's hands and said that if his work wasn't good enough for a man, then he should try it himself. Map took the hammer in his hands, after which his eyes lit up. All the guys gathered and carefully watched how the map worked. Hill, looking at the man, noted that he seemed to be good at it. Map swung his equipment. After that, he began to strike extremely fast blows at the pickaxe, which greatly amazed all those who gathered nearby and watched. Immediately after that, he dipped the weapon into the water and quickly sharpened the blade. The pickaxe came out so elegant and beautiful that it looked like a real work of art. Although the pickaxe is just a basic tool, Hill took a new pickaxe and walked forward, wondering if this tool would be able to break the stone. He turned around and told everyone to see that he had a regular pickaxe on his right and a map on his left. At the same moment, he hit the stone with both picks. Immediately after that, his doubt disappeared immediately. The mark left by the map's pickaxe was much larger than that of an ordinary pickaxe. Heel said that it is made of ordinary iron, and therefore he does not understand how Map was able to do this. The man just gave a thumbs up. At that moment, Heel noticed something unusual. He went up to a tall stone and said that he could be sure that he had left his item there. Rihanna turned around and asked in disbelief what had happened. The guy asked if they had seen a round stone nearby. Because of all the commotion, he had completely forgotten about it. The guy gasped in amazement when he noticed a human-shaped pit in the stone. He wondered if this could be true. He didn't notice because of the shadow of the rocks, but it looks like there were rocks there. That's how Heel realized that the Dragon Ball had resurrected Map. He sighed, thinking that he should be glad that they now had another loyal comrade. Thanks to Map's tools, the guys were able to enlarge the shore. They also dismantled the ship and began to rebuild it. They have been successful in some cases. Besides, they started to dig a lot more. They even found new slimes and tamed them. Now they are helping with transportation. Heel would like to say that everything was going great, but the problem was that they were finding fewer and fewer turtle stones. Rihanna said with a smile that she already had enough turtle stones. However, they increased the princess's life expectancy by only 10 years, and Heel was firmly convinced that the girl wanted to live on. Suddenly, Heel sighed heavily and told Shell that this was not true, and in fact it was the guy who wanted Rihanna to live longer. He wanted to dig more, develop the island, and live with Rihanna. Suddenly, he punched a hole into a certain cave. At that very moment, his face turned pale. He went inside and found a room downstairs. Earlier, Heel thought that this was just a desert island, and he had assumptions that something had happened here a long time ago. To begin with, he decided that he would take all the things from there. There he found a stone heart, which can become the basis for an artificial organism. Now he could create a doll. Heel wondered if he could create a new comrade. The advisor said that it is possible to combine materials for creation. He took the stone, thinking that he would decide later what to do with it. He also discovered the Golden Evolution Stone, which allowed the monster to evolve. Hill didn't know what that meant at all. The advisor said that he could change the appearance of the monster. The monster retains its age and personality, but its body changes. Heel thought it was very scary, but after that, an idea came to his mind. He met with the guys at night. Varys asked if it works so that the stone allows monsters to evolve. Hill asked if the old man had ever heard of such a thing. Varys agreed and said that every goblin knows about it, because it is described in their legends. Alvin also thought about it after it was mentioned. Varys looked at Heel and asked if the guy knew about species that looked very much like goblins. The guy thought about it and asked if Varys was talking about hobgoblins and leaf goblins. Varys agreed and said that they were ordinary goblins, but those who wanted more power turned into hobgoblins, and those who wanted to live deep in the forests turned into forest goblins. And all this is thanks to this stone. It was because of this that Heel understood what evolution meant. The guy looked at Alvin and asked if he was a hobgoblin. The man said that this was not the case, and he had never used this stone, but was simply born with such a body. Varys said that he previously believed that he existed only in legends, and he is surprised that he actually exists. According to the king of the cave, it allows the monster to get a new body and also extends its lifespan. The guys were very surprised. Hill looked at them and asked if they wanted to test it on the princess. Varys was interested, but too attached to his body. Alvin said his body was too good to change. The princess said that she wanted to help heal in any way, for example, with magic. However, she couldn't use something valuable. Varys said it wasn't a bad idea. Goblins can't use magic, but maybe if it evolves, then everything will work out. Hill said that if she could use magic, it would help him a lot, but above all, he wanted her to live a long time. The girl thought about it, and then said that she wanted to evolve. Hill said with a smile that everything was settled. Rhianna took the egg in her hands, after which she thought that she wanted to be with Mr. Hill for a very long time. Everything shone around, and the guys were amazed. The light was incredibly bright, and when it was over, Hill opened his eyes. Everyone watching was amazed. The guy asked if it was Rhianna. A girl with luxurious long hair and pointed ears gently opened her eyes, clutching her hands to herself. She looked at herself, then turned to Hill and asked what had happened to her. When Map saw her, her nose started to bleed, and the guys were amazed. Hill opened his eyes and mumbled, after which he asked in amazement when he managed to fall asleep. Suddenly he gasped, remembering Rhianna. He immediately shouted that Rhianna had evolved. At this time, the girl with black hair was looking at him. With a smile, she said that it was exactly like that, and Rhianna was right there. Hill was very scared when he opened his eyes and saw that he was lying on this girl's lap. Rhianna smiled warmly at him, and Hill blushed deeply and screamed. He immediately moved away from her and asked if it was true Rhianna. The girl said worriedly that he needed to lie down because he collapsed out of the blue. The guy blushed awkwardly, remembering what had happened. When Hill wanted to help Map, he bled himself. He screamed in panic that he was just a little tired, and that's the truth. He asked how long he had been asleep and what condition the Map was in now. The girl explained that it was still night, and Map was resting in another corner of the room. Hill blushed again and said he saw it. Hill asked if Rhianna was okay. He said that no one suspected that she would look like a human. The girl drooped. She admitted that she did not like her past appearance at all. She was cursed as a child, which made her sick, and her growth stopped. Her beautiful sisters laughed at her, and her parents tried to help at first, but later they also began to reject her. Therefore, there was no doubt that the moment she used the evolution stone, she wished to be beautiful. The girl apologized guiltily to Hill for using such a precious stone, according to her selfish desire. The guy thought about it. He also added that he does not know how to say this, but he feels that he has changed since he arrived on this island. So it's great if Rhianna feels like she has a new life too. He also asked if it wouldn't be a waste of time if she evolved but didn't get the body she wanted. She sincerely thanked the guy. The girl took his hand and said that her body, her life, and her name, all this was given to her by Hill, and therefore she offers him everything she has. The guy blushed, but also took her hands. The next moment, Hill blushed deeply, noticing that Map had woken up and was watching them. Obviously, the Baldan tribe was also shocked by Rhianna's evolution. The girl wore an extremely beautiful dress. She said it was made of terran and other spider tissue. Rhianna looked at the others and asked what they thought about it. Hill blushed, looking at Rhianna. Alvin and Varys saw how she was undergoing evolution, but many could not believe that it had passed so suddenly. But when they saw how hard she was working, they soon quickly realized that this was really their Rhianna. Moreover, she devoted herself to the study of martial arts and magic. It even seemed to Hill that Rhianna's ambitions were boundless. He was watching her labors with a warm smile, when suddenly Varys caught him doing it. Goblin asked if Hill had any idea in mind. Hill got confused and told Varys that he wasn't looking at Rhianna's feet or something. Goblin also said that everything is as expected from Hill because this is the coat of arms of the princess, Farmer. Hill was very surprised when he heard about the coat of arms. The farmer makes the harvest more abundant. Entrusting the plantation to the princess was a very good decision. Hill asked in surprise if goblins also have coats of arms. Varys agreed and asked if it was strange. Hill awkwardly apologized and said that in his kingdom they thought that only people had coats of arms. Varys admitted that he also has a coat of arms. He showed his hand, and Hill asked in amazement if this was the king of witchcraft. Varys calmly agreed. Hill said admiringly that it was an incredible coat of arms, and only one of his brothers had it. Varys agreed, but said it was useless for a goblin like him who couldn't use magic. He added that it was thanks to this that he was able to continue his research without wallowing in the power of the coat of arms. Heel wanted to suggest something, but Varys quickly said that this was a pointless conversation, and he would like to discuss the plan he mentioned yesterday. Varys's plan is to reclaim land from the sea to expand the island. With a larger area comes more crops, and they also need to create an expanded space where children can play. Varys called Heel and said that if he had the raw materials, he could do something. He said he wanted to try something, so Heel could leave it to him. He thought out the procedure, so it's okay. Heel could use the workshop outside the cave. Heel activated his workshop to process the rock. He used a combination of stone and sand to produce gravel. He then quickly extended his hand to place the blocks in the planned locations. Everyone was amazed. Next, the guys had to use water magic to remove seawater. They filled the space with stone and gravel and decided to cover the surface with spider mud. Heel said with a smile that everything was fine, but he didn't know if it would be enough now. When he ran out of land, he used the stone to make something like a public square. The guys were absolutely delighted. When they ran to the prepared area, Heel worriedly said that it was still dangerous there. However, he thought it was okay if they just ran there. The children, with wide smiles, began to thank Heel for this. He smiled warmly and said he was always happy to help. Rhaena came up to him and also thanked Hyla for everything. She said she was sure they would be able to grow a great crop. Heel said with a smile that he was looking forward to it. When the guys thought that everything was fine, in an instant a huge bird flew up to the open space and grabbed Map, who was running outside, with its beak. Hyla and Rhaena turned pale with horror. The monster very quickly and greedily began to absorb Map's body into its mouth, while the goblins watched in horror. They were pointing at the bird. They looked up into the sky in horror, where they saw a huge number of killer birds flying directly into the open area. Heel quickly waved his hand and told everyone else to return to the cave immediately. Rhaena helped the children back in with Varys. At that moment, one of the little goblins stumbled and fell, which Fuhi noticed. The girl ran up to her friend and scolded him, after which she helped him get up as soon as possible. Suddenly, Rhaena noticed this and screamed loudly, calling Hyla by name. One of the birds was rushing straight at the children at high speed. Fu was terrified, however. First of all, she hugged the boy tightly so that he would not be hurt in any way. At the moment when the bird was a meter away from the children, its head flew off, and the monster was killed. Heel looked in that direction in disbelief, as the monster's blood flew in different directions. At that moment, the weapon that killed the monster flew back. It moved until someone grabbed it tightly. Alvin held his weapon tightly in his hands, covering the children with himself. The girl looked at him in confusion, then called her father by name. Alvin smiled cruelly, after which he called his daughter, Fool, by her new name. He quickly said that the girl should leave here as soon as possible. Right after that, he was even more ready to fight. When all the children were in the cave, Alvin very quickly began to twist his axes around, deftly defeating enemy monsters. Hill was genuinely amazed and scared by the strength of the Baldan tribe general. The guy quickly stood up and covered Alvin's rear. He also praised the general for his good work and added that he would also help him now. Alvin shouted loudly and called the boss so that he could defend himself. While Heel was turning around, someone was using a shield. Rhaena stood behind the guys and used the shield extremely quickly, thereby protecting everyone else from the monster's back attack. The general was amazed to see the princess in action. The girl quickly said that she could cover for them too, so Heel had to do what he had to do. The guy was a little confused, but quickly came to his senses and agreed, thanking Rhaena for this. The three of them started attacking the monsters one by one. They understood the fact that they did not know which of the monsters had swallowed the map, so they should aim at the heads so as not to accidentally injure the man too. They all accepted the order. When everyone was protected, Varys shouted again, telling everyone to enter the shelter. He called the three guys and told them that they should also hurry up and go back inside. Alvan came forward a little, after which he told the others that he would take over the rear, so Hailu and Rhaena should protect the entrance to the cave. Heel remembered about the Heart of Stone. He said that everything was wrong, and he knew who would protect the cave the best. He threw his stone forward, at the same time spending production stones in the amount of 300 pieces. At the moment when the birds were rushing towards the cave at full speed, a huge hand brushed them away like flies. The oversized golem doll was designed. When the creature appeared, Heel exclaimed that the golem would protect the cave the best. At the same time, one of the birds, which was behind Heel, began coughing convulsively, trying to spit something out. After several diligent attempts, the monster spat out a map that landed on one of the slimes. Hill turned a little pale watching this. However, he understood that now they didn't have to worry about accidentally hitting map. He quickly called Alvin and asked if he could get all the birds together. The goblin was a little confused, but quickly realized and threw his weapon into the air, saying that Heel could provide it to him. With his dexterous movements, he twisted the rope that was attached to his weapon around the birds, which made them more confused until they collected a huge live ball. Alvin smiled smugly, after which he said that these ropes were made of spider silk, and they couldn't break them, even if they wanted to. When it was over, Heel shouted for them all to lie down on the ground. Alvan and Rihanna fell to the ground, and the goblin covered the girl's body with himself. Heel raised his hands high into the sky and conjured a strong blizzard. At the same moment, huge chunks of snow mixed with strong winds surrounded the birds and severely injured them. Rihanna and Alvin watched in amazement. The birds were scared and didn't know exactly what to do. They began to fly higher, quickly escaping from there. Heel sighed with a smile, after which he said that they were flying away from here. Upon seeing this, the goblins began to cheerfully shout. Alvin ran up to Hill and said that it worked just fine. Rihanna also ran to the guy, asking if he was injured. Suddenly, the girl fell down. She was very surprised herself. Hill was confused and went to Rihanna to help. The girl apologized awkwardly, saying that she was really scared. However, Heel was with her, so she was fine. Upon hearing this, Heel blushed a little. His legs were also shaking, and he pointed it out, saying that this was the first time he had actually fought monsters. They laughed. Varys said loudly that he was very glad that they were all okay. Hyle and Rihanna joined hands, when suddenly all the goblins and the map gathered around them. They were very happy and rejoiced at the victory. Heel smiled, thinking that it seemed like even someone like him could become something like a real ruler. The guy asked Rihanna if she could eat a killer bird. The girl agreed and said they were delicious. So the guys decided that they would have fried meat for dinner tonight. Pretty quickly and deftly, the little goblins butchered the bird. They separated the feathers and cooked the meat for consumption, making delicious dishes. Alvin grabbed Hill by the shoulder and then said that he would like to thank their boss. The guy was a little embarrassed by the attention. At night, the guys all gathered around the campfire, where Rihanna cooked fried meat. They were all very happy when they started eating. They were looking at a crowded table, on which there was just a huge amount of meat in various forms. That night, when they fought off the killer birds, they had an unprecedented banquet. Rihanna turned to Hill with a smile and said that he should start eating too. The guy agreed a little awkwardly, looking at the piece of meat that he was holding in his hands. The guy looked at the meat carefully, thinking that he had never tasted monster meat before. But this color and smell were just incredible. Heel took a small and extremely careful bite, after which he began to chew the meat. The next moment he gasped in admiration, thinking that he no longer had any doubts about this. Rihanna laughed contentedly, noting that Hill liked everything. The girl also said that they also have soup. The guy happily said that it was just great. Heel was diligently praising all the food. Suddenly he noticed something in the soup. Then he looked at Rihanna and asked if it was really the same meat. The girl gasped, not checking that he noticed it. Rihanna said that the killer bird has different tastes depending on the part they eat. It can taste like 3 different animals. Wings and legs taste like chicken, the belly is like beef, and the shoulder is pork. Heel noted this, and then said that it would be extremely dangerous if they attacked again. However, they may also consider these monsters as a good food source. The guy said that the golem should stand guard at all times. Varys came closer and said with a smile that it was a very good idea. The old man noted that killer birds simply would not attack those who were bigger than them. Heel looked at the man in some surprise. Varys said he would assemble a guard unit, because perhaps it would be a good idea to build walls and watchtowers. They will also serve well to protect fields from salt damage. Heel agreed and said that the processing of the stone could be left to him. He also asked Varys to work on the layout. Suddenly, he noticed a little girl who had been sitting next to them all this time. Full sat next to them and silently looked at the guys, simultaneously eating a bone with meat. Heel was very confused when the girl began to look at him from all sides. He was pretty sure it was Alvin's daughter. The girl approached Hill with displeasure, after which she said that her name was Full. She reminded him that it was he who had given her that name. The guy was confused and moved away. He apologized and then asked if she really needed anything. The girl took a short pause, after which she asked why he was so strong. Heel looked at her in disbelief, then asked if she was talking about magic. He said that it was due to the extraction of ore. He dug up stones that increase magical power, and therefore became stronger. Full asked in amazement if there were magic stones in this place. The girl asked if she could start digging them too. Rihanna said a little awkwardly that in order to use magic, goblins must first develop and change their bodies with the help of the Stone of Evolution. Full proudly said that she was going to evolve. Hill asked in some perplexity if it was really that simple. He also added that they don't have an evolution stone. Alvin came up and hit the girl on the head, saying that it was time for her to stop bothering their boss. Alvin also added that Full shouldn't say that. He lowered his daughter's head, after which he said that she was always interested in how to become stronger. Heel smiled and said that there was nothing you could do about such a strong father. Alvin asked in disbelief if this was true, but Full did not answer. The guy said that if the girl wants the Stone of Evolution, then she should dig, and if she finds it, she can use it. She asked if it was true, and if Heel was sure. Immediately after that, she turned around joyfully and exclaimed that she was good at mining ore, and therefore promised to help Mr. Hill. Elvin, perplexed, asked the guy if he was sure of his decision. Heel said that having more people who can use magic would be for the best, and he knows it. After that, Heel shifted his gaze to Rihanna and looked at the number of magic stones at the moment. He deftly transferred 500 stones to her. The girl looked at him in disbelief. Heel said that he just tried to use some magic stones on her to increase the girl's magical power. Startled, she asked if she was looking at her. The girl quickly said that she understood and that she would do everything possible to become a better person. Alvin said it was the right thing to do and they needed to gain strength. He said they should start eating right. The guys agreed. Today they have completed land reclamation and received delicious meat. They had a Thanksgiving party. And this day became the first memorable day on Sheol Reef. Suddenly, Heel sneezed loudly. The guys made a refrigerator to store a large amount of food. It was Rihanna's idea. The guy looked back and said he would go. Shivering from the cold, the girl said that they should go out. Now there was no fear that the meat would spoil. Rihanna agreed and said that on the continent, food would be stored for more than 6 months if it were stored in frozen caves. Mara needed a large steel door, but apparently he also had complaints about the amenities. Hill asked if the man wanted the guy to shape the stone that way. He also noted that map draws well, so the forge was also updated. Rihanna has become more confident lately. The girl said that she would periodically use freezing in order to make sure that the ice does not melt. Thanks to Alvin and Varys, the external defense was going well, and now Heel could focus on mining again. Full said in disbelief that she was surprised that nothing bad had happened in that time. Heel agreed with the girl. She said that the Cave King is amazing. She knows that light optimizes their production and helps to avoid blockages, but not knowing anything about mines is just too careless. The guy agreed. Full added that they need ventilation, because dust is harmful to the lungs. She asked if Hill was mining coal. She said that if the gas accumulates, they can get poisoned, or, in the worst case, explode. The guy was surprised. There is an air supply device outside, and they need to ask Map to build it. Hill said it would be very helpful. He noted that Fuggle knows a lot about mines. The girl said that she has been working since childhood, after which she showed her coat of arms. This is the coat of arms of the miner. She can dig too, but it's no match for the Hill Cave King. However, Full could dig. Hill said it was encouraging, and if she noticed something, she should tell him. The girl agreed. Full is experienced. She may be lagging behind in quantity and speed, but she works very efficiently, and her intuition in mining ore is simply amazing. He felt that she was his biggest rival since Terran. Suddenly, the girl thought about it and asked if Heel had a father. The guy quietly said that he was. She said she was sure he was a great man. Hill was silent. Hill was afraid of his father and brothers. It is true that he has acquired incredible magical powers, but this is a family with unlimited power that dwarfs even what he has. Hill asked if Full wanted to become stronger than his father. The girl said she didn't care and then returned to work. Hill noted that it was easy to read. Suddenly he noticed that he had found something and asked if it was really a karst cave. Full said she did it, and there's something there. The cave was huge. Full asked if the evolution stone was in the same room. Like this one, he confirmed it. He was greatly strained by the statues inside when suddenly one of them had eyes that lit up. The guy tried to stop the foul when the statue started attacking. Hill used a shield to deflect the attack. He asked if Full was okay, to which the girl replied positively. They were golems, but the one that Heel was making can't use magic. The golems started attacking the guys, and Heel noticed that they even had swords. They surrounded the guys, and then Heel folded his arms. He activated a strong storm that instantly destroyed the monsters. Heel asked if Full was hurt. The girl said she was fine. She apologized for going ahead without thinking. The guy said that it happened all his expectations at the moment when the golems appeared. He ordered Shell to inform everyone, because they need to suspend ore mining. Suddenly, Fool found a golden stone and asked what it was doing. It turned out to be a royal stone, which is not needed by Fool. She was upset. Suddenly, a map came out, which scared the girl. Hill wondered what the man was going to do now. Fool didn't know, but he looked happy. Map quickly took the sword and left. Fool asked how long Map was going to walk around like this. She asked if all people are like that. Heel said not many, but he had never seen Map so excited. Heel wondered if there was anything unusual about this sword. He tried to pick it up, but the weapon did not move. They tried together that he still didn't move. They just wanted to take him away. The advisor said that the king of the cave could not collect anything except minerals and mined items. The guy saw that the processed items were very good. He hit with a pickaxe, but it didn't work. Fool was surprised that even Heel couldn't break it. The guy said he wasn't done yet. He struck again, and the sword broke along with the pickaxe. He managed to do it, but even Map's ice axe couldn't stand it. Heel looked at what the sword was made of. It was orichalcum, which is legendary. It is lighter and stronger than metal, and can also enchant magical effects. The guy wondered why he couldn't lift it if it was lighter than metal. Suddenly he froze, startled by his realization. At that time, Alvin was trying to do something. All his muscles were very tense as he put all his strength into it. Rihanna and Varys watched in silence as he tried to raise his sword. Hill came out of the cave and asked what was going on. Rihanna was a little confused, after which she said that Map had brought a sword and everyone was trying to pick it up. Heel was very surprised, after which he said that it was simply impossible. He said that the sword was made of 300 ingots of orichalcum. Rihanna and Varys were very surprised when they heard about this. Full ran to her father, saying that it was impossible. The man did not stop, only continuing to apply force. He tensed up and raised his sword with a loud shout. All the goblins exclaimed in admiration that this was their great General Elvin. It was only at this moment that Heel could see that the cross of the great warrior was visible on Alvin's chest. It was then that Heel realized the reason why Alvin was so strong. Suddenly, he lost his balance and started falling backwards with the sword. Heel and Fullen turned pale with horror and shock when they saw this. Everyone ran to the fallen general. Heel examined him and said he thought he was fine and the wound wasn't that big. Along with that, he used recovery magic. The guy said that Alvin was tough, but it was dangerous. The general struggled up and sat down, when suddenly Little Fool hugged him so tightly that he coughed in pain. Alvin was very confused, looking at the girl who hugged him tightly. In tears, she said he was a fool, because she was really worried. Alvin apologized, and said he would be more careful. Heikel and Rihanna, who were watching this, smiled warmly. The guy turned around, and noticed that, at the same time, Map was melting an orichalcum sword. The legendary dwarf race is very fond of using rare minerals. Dwarves have incredible physical strength, mysterious techniques, and a noble spirit. Hill asked what Map was doing. Suddenly, the man handed the weapon to Hill. The guy wasn't sure if he would pick it up, but he was surprised. He picked up this instrument extremely easily. It was an orichalcum ice axe. After that, Map made all kinds of orichalcum instruments. The guy thought that Map was a real genius, and there is no doubt about it. However, Heel did not think that the desire to be naked was part of the legend. The axe flew high up while explosions thundered around, signaling that something serious was approaching and requiring intervention. After catching the cannon, the orc heard his team shout that even the general's axe could not cope with the impending danger. The orc was very angry. He clearly did not want to show himself in front of his army in such a way, so he resolutely strode forward. Smiling, the orc clenched his fists with such force that they made a crunching sound. The creature was preparing for the approaching fight. Spreading his arms in a pose that should help deflect the blow, the orc shouted loudly that he was ready to fight the enemy. In another place, Full, sensing something, began to sniff to feel the fresh air. After the girl was delighted, the young man also noted that the air became much cleaner, thanks to ventilation, which his girlfriend advised. Also, the design was helped to improve by Map, who made rotating blades, which constantly supply fresh air to the right place. A little later, the girl began to stretch her shoulders and said that she would like to return to the prey, to which the guy replied that he shared her desire. However, it was never known where it would be possible to dig up something dangerous again, so it was worth waiting. Full decided to go to the forge, and Heel decided to create new golems, which will be an improved version of the previous ones, for safety. The guy thought that while he was busy with alchemy, Map would be able to make new equipment. Having drawn the appearance of the new warriors on the ground, the young man thought that he was too carried away because their task was protection, not beauty. The new golems will have the defensive power of orichalcum equipment, a melee sword and a bow. Muttering to himself the innovations of the warriors, the young man did not notice how a girl with dark hair approached him. Rihanna apologized for scaring the young man, but he was too focused on his plans. The girl asked if the young man had free time and, after his answer, asked him to go with her. Heel was surprised by such self-confidence, but Rihanna only smiled mysteriously and replied that the guy would like what he saw. After some time, the couple came to the appointed place and, although the girl was a little confused, the young man was really surprised by what he saw. Looking around, the young man liked what he saw, because there were many beautiful plants next to him and the sea was visible in the distance. Praising the girl for her efforts and for making such a magnificent garden, Heel noted that he liked to see apple trees, vineyards, as well as lemon trees and palm trees in it. However, despite all the praise, Rihanna said that they still don't have enough food, so she added that she had an idea to fix the situation. After making a break, the girl hit the trunk of a palm tree hard, causing coconuts to fall from it. Heel was surprised by such a trick, and Rihanna wasted no time and moved on. Jumping up, Rihanna literally flew up to the falling coconuts and began hitting them to split them. She did it quickly and very neatly. When the trick was completed, the girl sank to the ground while the surprised Heel looked at her and could not understand how she could do something like that. However, this was not the end, because Rihanna continued to prepare the drink. When she finished, Rihanna said that you can mix lemon juice with coconut or with plain water. Tasting the drink, the young man wondered where the girl got such strength, because even though he knew that she was studying martial arts, he did not expect such skill. After finishing the contents of the glass, Heel noted that the drink turned out to be very tasty and was quite refreshing, as well as the fact that it tasted better than ordinary juice. Before the girl could reply, the couple was interrupted by Alvin's scream. The orc asked the boss if he could restart the loot. After the guy replied that he could, he decided to look at what Alvin was holding on his hands. The orc lowered the prey to the ground and replied that he had taken out a satanic shell, which was located on the outskirts of the island. Alvin also warned that the shell of this creature is very strong, so the axe that the shell took away could only be reached by the general, who would crush it with his strength. Varys went to the shell, opened it, and then extracted some liquid from it, which Map immediately tasted. It turned out that the liquid was specially produced by the creature for its victims. The sage also added that depending on how it is processed, the liquid can become a deadly poison for the victim. However, Varys immediately added that he was joking, and the liquid was needed to create purple paint. While Hill was helping Map, he was thinking that he would need a lot of warriors to protect his possessions. Having turned his thoughts into reality, Heel created 14 new golems, so if you take into account the old ones, there were not so few of them. The warriors from the 6th to the 15th had magic stones. 2 of them studied defensive magic, and the other 2 had one of the 4 attributes. Later, a bell was heard ringing. One of the orcs reported that there was a problem, and shells began to attack them. The creatures were in a part of the wall that hadn't been finished yet. The orc also said that there were a lot of shells, they climbed the wall, and there were more than 50 of them. Heel turned to Varys and asked him what was the weakness of their opponents, to which the sage replied that the shells were not afraid of fire or cold, but they could withstand lightning. Hill looked at Alvin and asked him not to interfere, because the guy wanted to test his golems. The orc agreed, but said he would help if needed. The young man also turned to Rihanna, who possessed lightning magic. The girl was ready for battle, so she asked to provide spells for her. Approaching the first warrior, Heel prepared to give him an order. The first golem held out his hand so that Heel and Rihanna could climb on it. The couple did it quickly enough. Holding on to his partner, the young man gave an order to his warriors, with numbers 6 through 15, to start attacking their enemy. The shell squad was getting closer and closer, as the wall was no barrier to them. The creatures were aggressive and made angry noises. As soon as they got closer, the shells jumped forward to attack, however. Heel ordered the golems, the 6th and 7th, to put up a defense, which they quickly did, deflecting the blow. To help her friend, the girl also took action and used magic to activate the lightning that the shells were afraid of. Alvin was delighted with the way the princess fought, and Varys noted that the large golems looked like mobile fortifications. Heel did not get distracted and, praising the girl, ordered the 14th and 15th numbers to attack. The magic that the princess used worked, which caused a lot of shells to be destroyed. But their squad still did not give up. Deciding to use a different tactic, the creatures began to spit out the liquid they produced, Because of this, the golems slightly suspended their offensive and weakened their defenses. However, Rihanna did not allow this to last long. She repelled the attack and paralyzed the shells again with her magic. Alvin, watching the battle, noted that the golems would not allow the creatures to get their liquid to the guy, which means that the battle would end much sooner than one might have thought at the beginning. The golems that could use magic were really strong, and Rihanna was able to help them finish the battle faster. Heal praised everyone who participated in the battle. The girl later offered to take the meat to the freezer so that it would not spoil in the sun. The young man agreed and ordered Creation Number 1 to help the princess. However, as soon as the girl turned her back to the defeated enemies, she heard a strange sound behind her and, turning around, saw that several shells began to rise again. The princess noticed that the creature wanted to attack Heal, so she jumped on his back so that the liquid would not get on him, taking his fate upon herself. Alvan quickly got his bearings and destroyed the shell, but its contents still fell on the princess. Heal shouted to the orc that he was fine. However, as soon as he looked at the girl, his face immediately turned red. Rihanna fell on her comrade and began to apologize to him for this. Heal was confused. He didn't understand what he needed to do in such a situation. After looking at the young man, the princess began to talk abruptly about how her body was completely numb due to the liquid, so she could not move normally to get off him. Heal couldn't stand it for long, so he immediately began to remove the effect under the influence of which his interlocutor was. Rihanna thanked the embarrassed guy for helping, but noted that her body was still very sticky. To help the princess a little more, Heal decided to bring water so that the girl could remove the slime, but she replied that she could handle it herself. Turning around, the young man noticed that one shell nearby had something glistening inside. The young man saw something very bright, and Rihanna said that it was a pearl, which was very rarely found inside satanic shells. Taking the object in his hands, the young man noted that the pearl was indeed very beautiful. Handing the object to the girl, Heal added that she could take the pearl, because he did not know its value and thought that it would suit her very well. Rihanna was initially surprised by the unexpected gift, and later a blush appeared on her face. After a few seconds of realizing what was happening, Rihanna's face turned completely red with embarrassment, and the girl began to stutter. After returning the pearl back, the princess said that she would not be able to accept such a gift and ran away. The young man did not understand what had happened, but the object remained in his palm. The next day, the young man was in one of the mines and told his fool that they should take a break to rest, but the girl was not going to stop and wanted to work longer. The young man decided not to interfere, but reminded the girl not to forget about the snack. The guy also ordered his 15th golem to call him if something serious happened. Under the protection of the golems, the team managed to resume mining, and while one of the creatures with the captain's crown from the map, Full was very energetic and worked hard. Rihanna kindly helped with the food and cooked for her companions. As soon as the company saw the dishes, she pounced on them, after which the girl added that they should not hurry, because she made a lot of things from shell meat. Due to the fact that the creatures were nesting somewhere near the island and continued to approach, the team could get good food, paints, and other resources after destroying the shells. However, the currents around Sheol Reef brought not only some garbage or something useful to the shores of the island, the waves brought something more than just a blessing to the area. There was a body in the water, showing no signs of life. Looking at various things, the young man explored a material called Tyrian purple. He looked great. The orcs were actively working with the fabric, while the guy noted that it looked better than the one used by the nobles. The sage also said that they would use it to make various things, including clothes. Turning around, Heal noticed Alvan and wanted to show him what the orcs had managed to make from new materials. However, the young man stopped. The orc looked very sad. As soon as he arrived, he couldn't find the words to address the young man. After some time, the orc was still able to start his speech, but it was only enough to ask Heal to go with him to the conquered land. The young man did not resist and went with Varys after Alvin. There were already a lot of orcs on the pier, who were looking at something. It turned out that the crowd had fished out the body of the dead orc from the sea and began to look at it to understand who it was. The young man was no less surprised than those present. Alvin began to explain and said that the body was fished out on the embankment and dragged here. The seal that was on the deceased notified that the orc belonged to the tribe that destroyed their native home. One of the orcs shouted that they should not be afraid of the corpse and urged his comrades to start destroying it. The crowd was angry, because they understood that the deceased was related to their deceased relatives and comrades. The orcs began to kick the body, so the young man hurried to stop them and turned to Alvin and Varys to help him calm the creatures, but saw that they themselves were very angry. Heal understood that the dead orc was an enemy of the Belden tribe, so he did not have the heart to stop those who were so angry at the enemy. The young man believed that he had no right to do so. However, someone still shouted for the crowd to immediately stop doing what they were doing, which made the orcs flinch. It turned out that the princess had managed to approach them, who was very indignant at what the orcs were doing with the body of the deceased warrior. Rhianna said that kicking a dead man is a disgrace, so the whole Belden tribe will lose their pride. The orcs tried to object and replied that they would never be able to forgive what had happened to their home. The princess understood everything, so she humbly closed her eyes. However, she still added that they should not behave in this way, and also reminded that Heel should decide what to do with those who came to the island. After Rhianna was able to stop the orcs, the young man realized that he was very grateful to the princess for such bravery and courage. Realizing his mistake, Heel stepped forward, covering the corpse with himself, and said that he understood the sadness and hatred that the orcs felt. However, he added that he would not allow those who had already died to be mocked. The young man understood that he had to take full responsibility for himself, and asked for forgiveness for asking him to restrain his anger, because it was very difficult. Seeing the way the young man bowed his head, the orcs immediately began to ask him to raise it. Later, Heel asked Varys to take care of the burial of the dead man, but the sage replied that the orc lying in front of them was not the only one who died. After examining the sea, everyone saw that there was a whole detachment of enemy soldiers in the water who died during the battle. The orcs dragged 24 corpses to the island, but there were not only orcs among them. It turned out that among the corpses were kobolds, who were also the worst enemies of the Belden tribe. They also fought against the enemy orcs. Heel did not believe that kobolds and orcs could fight each other so cruelly, to which Varys replied that it was strange for them to be together in such a remote area. Approaching the boss, Alvin said that it seemed strange to him that all the corpses had combat wounds, because the orc had never seen such severe wounds before. Perhaps they were inflicted by fangs, and someone looked as if he had been burned alive. Since even magic couldn't do something like that to warriors, the young man thought that maybe the orcs and kobolds were attacked by someone else. Alvin replied that he could not guess who it was, but they should have increased their vigilance and watched for armed ships. Because of this, Hill assigned Varys to handle the funeral, and Alvin to handle the defense of the island. The guy himself, along with Rhianna, started looking for things that could be useful, because the conditions on the island were not too good. The girl noted that all the debris was in terrible condition, and the guy was attracted by an incomprehensible sound. It turned out that someone was squeaking softly from a chest nearby. Rhianna tried to open the thing, but it did not work, after which Heel saw that it had a lock. Using magic, the young man opened the chest, and some kind of creature immediately jumped out of it, which jumped on Heel. He picked up the animal. The guy realized that there was an ordinary puppy in front of him, who was very scared. The small animal twitched and quickly jumped off the young man's arms, starting to run over him. The guy didn't know what to do, so he turned to Rhianna for help. Due to the fact that the puppy was scared, he soiled the young man's shirt, and the girl laughed and promised to wash it soon. As soon as the animal moved into the princess's arms, it calmed down a little, and the young man noticed that he looked like a kobold. The girl also said that the baby was not to blame for anything, so no one should be against him staying with them on the island. The young man was not sure about this, but he understood that they needed to take care of the puppy. The next day, Heel worked again to finish off the materials. Thanks to a special orichalcum ice axe, he did it fast enough. There were many thoughts in the young man's head about the recent battle on the coastal waters. The young man understood that he needed to extract raw materials to protect the island. After a while, the guy decided to check his inventory. The number of magic stones increased more slowly each time, which was not enough to increase Rhianna's magical energy. The guy also wanted Full and Varys to use magic as well as the princess. Seeing something unusual in his inventory, the young man noticed that he was holding a seed, but it was unclear where it came from. Suddenly, a girl ran up to the guy who wanted to say something. At the same time, the orcs who were next to the puppy made faces at him to scare him, and then laughed when they saw the reaction of the animal. After the orc, the spider also tried to change his expression, but the puppy became even more scared, which made the orc puzzled because they tried to calm him down, not make him cry. The next moment, his daughter's foot hit Alvin in the back, who wanted to force her father to stop making grimaces. The orc tried to explain that when Fool was little, he comforted her in this way. Heel came up and said that in this way the orc was only scaring the animal. The puppy, seeing his savior, immediately ran up to him and bent him down in his arms. The puppy began to lick Heel's face, which made a smile appear on his face. Rhianna and Full also smiled, seeing how the animal rejoiced at the sight of the young man. The general drooped, because his efforts were not appreciated. Rhianna assumed that the puppy was thinking that Heel was his father. Seeing how Varys opened an empty chest, The guy asked if there was anything in it, to which the sage replied that, most likely, the object had a double bottom, because it was smaller inside than outside. However, even an orichalcum knife does not help to pierce the bottom of the chest. Heel, having handed the puppy to Rihanna, decided to try to help the old man. After opening the item with magic, everyone was glad that they had not made a mistake in their guesses, and the bottom was indeed false. The young man took out several books and an unusual stone from the chest. The books chronicled the history of the Tiberius tribe, as well as Tiberian writing techniques. It turned out that the unusual object was a thought stone that could store someone's messages. No one could read what was written in the books, but Heel paid attention to the sage. Varus was a little puzzled, so the young man was also wary, because the stone that Heel was holding began to glow. Gradually, an image began to appear in the place where everyone was gathered, showing someone's thoughts to those present. The next moment, a female creature appeared in the Meschera, who was dressed in a beautiful costume and held a scepter in his hand. As soon as the unknown woman appeared, Heel was very surprised, because he had not imagined that the stone would create something like this. Rihanna only noted how beautiful the stranger was. A little later, everyone began to hear the voice that belonged to the girl. She said that if the recording started playing, then someone took the seal off her chest. The stranger said that she was the queen of the Tiberius Alcmena tribe, and the one whom the strangers found in the chest was her newborn child. Elvis, upon hearing the name of the tribe, immediately became angry. But the recording continued, and it said that the queen did not have much time, but she needed to tell something. It turned out that her ship was being chased by the legendary Leviathan. Upon hearing about this, everyone present was greatly surprised. Alhemena added that her battle with the orcs left her squad exhausted, and their weapons and magic did not work against the monster. Since she couldn't escape, she only asked that someone take care of the child. All that was offered to the saviors as a reward were 2 of the strongest warriors, who were tasked with protecting the chest, and 3 books that were forbidden to outsiders. The recording began to break off, and the woman once again asked to take care of her child, and added that perhaps one day her child would hear her last words. Before the image went out, the queen managed to smile and say that she, Alcmena, loves her baby very much. The puppy, who was dutifully sitting in Rihanna's arms, could not understand what was happening around and only looked up somewhere. As soon as the image disappeared and the recording stopped, silence fell in the cave. Everyone was uncomfortable with what they had to learn. Alvin was angry, saying that their enemy tribe couldn't even take care of the heir. The orc left without paying attention to the remarks and added that he would tell the guards what they had learned. Foe came up to Hill and said that the Beres and Belden tribes had been fighting among themselves for a long time, and her younger brother had died in the war, which was why her father was so angry. However, it was clear to everyone that Alvin did not hold a grudge against the baby, because he would never have been able to hate someone so innocent. Varus said that the general really blamed himself for the death of his son. However, the sage added that his brother had died in the war himself, but he did not hold a grudge against the child, because it was not guilty of anything. Heel looked at those present and said that he would be able to take care of the little puppy, to which everyone smiled approvingly and supported this venture. However, the guy thought about how to name the baby. Rihanna also noted that his mother deliberately did not tell him so that those who would take care of him would give him a name. Hill asked Rihanna what she would like to name the animal. The princess suggested the real option. Heel quickly agreed and, picking up the puppy in his arms, pronounced his new name. A sign appeared nearby, notifying that Riel had been tamed by a human, but the guy did not strive for something like this. Full, on hearing the puppy's new name, noticed that Rihanna called him that only because she put her name and the young man's name together. The princess blushed because her plan had been revealed. Varus noted that they had a problem that needed to be solved. Heel immediately guessed what was being said and remembered Alvin's words about the condition in which the corpses were fished out of the sea. Putting together the information from the queen of the enemy tribe and the thoughts of the orc, the young man realized that everything led to only one creature, Leviathan. Standing next to Map, the young man asked if the man was sure that he would use his magic, and after a nod from the interlocutor, the young man began to act. Using fire magic, Heel used the seal to cause a large explosion that was directed in the opposite direction. Everyone looked ahead expectantly. At the place where the attack was made, there was a golem that activated the shield. The magic damage did not work, as the defense turned out to be very strong and worked as planned. Heel noted that the orichalcum shield was even more effective with magic cast than without it. It seemed to be very durable. Deciding to ask about the progress of the others, The young man turned to Varys and Alvin. The orc replied that the map's project was progressing splendidly, because with such structures, they would be able to protect the island even from giant monsters that could attack them. Looking at the new weapon, Heel wondered if Leviathan was really a mythical creature. He was also haunted by the information that a group of soldiers led by Alhemina had been destroyed by a water monster. The conversation was distracted by barking. Looking around, Alvin saw that Rachel had climbed high on the structure and could not get down from there, which made him tremble violently. The orc decided to help the animal down, however. As soon as he got to him, the puppy jumped on his body, knocking Alvin down. The princess ran up and asked Riel not to distract anyone from their work. The girl apologized for the behavior of the baby, but the orc replied that everything was fine and asked why the puppy was not with Rhianna in the field. Recalling recent events, the girl replied that he was very active and prevented the other orcs from planting seeds. The sage also noted that the kobold cubs matured quickly, so soon Riel would start walking on two paws. Remembering the unusual seed, Heel asked Varys if he knew what was in the guy's inventory. The sage replied that he had never seen such seeds before, but Rhianna quickly replied that it was Yggdrasil. The men were surprised that the girl knew the name of the seed, but the princess did not expect herself to say the answer so quickly. It turned out that Hill had heard that the farmer's coat of arms bestowed knowledge about plants, and after these words, Varys replied that he remembered Yggdrasil. The sage added that giant trees grow from such seeds, blessing all living things. But this was only a fairy tale. Although it was only a story, there was still a chance that it could be true. Having moved to another place, next to which there were sea waters, Heel continued to work and fight his way through the rock. Rhianna praised the young man for his efforts and noted that the cultivated lands had become a defensive zone for them, although fertile fields were planned nearby. After cutting a passage through the entire rock, the guy stopped. Noticing that he already had enough materials, Heel decided that, because of his cave search function, he needed helpers who would carry the soil outside. Thanks to the young man and the spiders, they were able to finish cultivating the new land that evening, so the guy asked them to hurry up and plant the seed he found. Rhianna decided to sow flower seeds from her hometown because she thought they would look beautiful in such a place. The guy did not mind and praised the princess for her initiative. Map appeared next to the guy, who was silently looking at the plant in front of him. The young man also looked at the sprout and realized that the seed was sprouting quickly. Yggdrasil had indeed already appeared from the ground, so Heel asked if they should use the sunstone to grow more efficiently. Map quickly shook his head, denying its use, so the young man asked the princess to use her magic. When the girl lifted the stone above her, she made it sparkle, after which the plant began to grow rapidly, turning from a seedling into a large tree. When the tree grew, everyone noted that the sunstone was indeed useful. But the rain caused by magic did not stop in any way, and the branches continued to increase. Heel asked if Rhianna had used the right spell for sure, because the situation was becoming dangerous enough for them. Due to the fact that Yggdrasil did not stop in his growth, the young man grabbed the princess by the hand and shouted to everyone that they should quickly run away from the territory. The company moved forward quickly, but halfway through, Map fell, and the roots of the tree began to pull him back, making it impossible to get out. Hyle shouted at Mappa, trying to help him. But Yggdrasil was merciless and only threw all the remaining creatures with his roots in the other direction. Everyone on the island raised their heads and stared at what was now casting a shadow over a vast area. Hill clearly hadn't expected to see something like this. The place they had prepared in order to plant a tree and make fields was completely absorbed by the roots of Yggdrasil, who grew up on the island. The tree was so huge that its roots hung down, touching the seawater. The young man exclaimed in surprise and delight, because what he saw clearly exceeded his expectations. However, Heel did not admire the tree for long, because he remembered that his friend was swallowed up by the roots of a rapidly growing tree. The guy decided that first it was necessary to find him to help. As soon as Rhianna saw the map, the team began to move in the right direction, noting that now this place looked like a mountain. When he reached the man, Heel said they would get him out soon. However, as soon as the young man was next to the body, he realized that Map was sleeping, completely not worried about what happened to him, and not suffering from pain or something worse. Without wasting time, Heel said that he and Rhianna needed to figure out how to get the body to the surface. However, the girl said that there was a strange but wonderful smell around the tree, which the young man later felt. The princess added that she felt great magical power from the tree, and Heel was surprised that the girl was able to quickly identify something like this, which meant that her magic skills had greatly increased. Heel replied that the flow of magic was really strong, and she looked like a saint. Later, the couple noticed that an aid group was already approaching them, so Heel decided to ask Valis to explore the tree. A puppy also appeared next to the couple, who was told by Heel to move to a safe place, because they had not yet explored the territory. But the animal was not afraid at all. At the same time, Rihanna smiled and said that the forest was like a home for the puppy, and, most likely, he missed such a territory. The young man was slightly embarrassed, but smiled at Rahel and replied that she was probably right. The guy suggested that the puppy explore a new place together, because he had to adapt to the place in which he now lived. The small animal was happy to run along the roots of a large tree, while Rihanna helped Hill climb over uneven surfaces, which was difficult for the young man. When he reached the edge of the territory, climbing up to which there was a beautiful view of the sea, Heel was glad of what he saw, because the sea was very beautiful. Looking into the distance, the young man said that a lot would be visible from here, but he was upset by the fact that he did not notice any ships, which meant that the kingdom had completely forgotten about him. Rihanna decided to ask how the young man ended up alone on this island in general, after which she immediately apologized for her question and added that she had long been interested in finding out how Heel got here. The young man sat down next to her and replied that he really hadn't told anyone about it, but he wouldn't hide anything from the princess, because he didn't want to intentionally hide the truth from her. The young man smiled sadly and said that he had been expelled from his native kingdom, because his stay was completely useless. It was noticeable how unpleasant and hard it was for him, from his own words. The girl could not believe it and said that such a man could not be useless, because he worked so hard for everyone on the island, helping her, the puppy, and all the orcs. Touching the small jar around his neck, the young man added that he had never cared about ruling the capital, so he was completely uninteresting to his family. Talking about the past, the young man recalled that he wandered past old buildings used by servants, ran away from home, and spent his time reading various books. Compared to how the guy was treated at the castle, the island was the most pleasant place for Heel. But one day, after escaping from the castle once again, the young man found something. Noticing that something suddenly made a noise in the barrel next to him, the guy decided to check what it was, and a small creature appeared in front of him. The guy realized that there was a demon in front of him, who was clearly not friendly, but he was chained up, so he couldn't escape anywhere. The young man did not understand why someone like this was in the capital, but he noticed that the demon was clearly mistreated, because wounds were visible everywhere on it. Picking up a book from the floor, Heel decided to try recovery magic to help the monster heal from its wounds. The next day, the young man came to the same place again. The young man began to bring food to the demon and even gave him a name, Lopez. Also, the guy tried every time to open the lock that was on the creature's neck, but he couldn't do anything. To find a way to free the demon from its shackles, the guy read books and practiced magic, enjoying the time spent with Lopez, because with him, Heel was much better than with people. The young man was telling the creature that even if he couldn't pick the lock on his neck, he would just hire someone who could do it. This promise was made to Lopez. After some time, Heel heard that a man was walking in his direction, later realized that he was not alone. The guy did not understand who could get into such a place, because it was located among the slums. In front of him, the young man saw a man with shining golden hair and snow-white skin. The young man was as handsome as the girl. Turning around, the guy with blonde hair said that his older brother looked more energetic than usual, which was not typical for him in the castle walls. The young man also added that Heel remained as useless as ever. It turned out that the guy was Hyla's younger brother, Orin. He was the 18th prince of the Kingdom of Sunfall. Up until the moment Gil met Lopez, Orin and his friends had been training on him. The demon suffered a lot, because he could not stand up for himself or escape in any way. The young man showed the people present at the training that accuracy was very important in magic, because as long as the creature could not resist, you could do whatever you wanted with it. Having shown how to act, the prince urged his friends that they should also hone their skills on the demon, because they specifically kept it for this. Everyone present really began to use their abilities and use magic, directing it towards the defenseless creature. Orin liked what he was doing, so he longed to see how Lopez suffered and could not escape from people, because a strong spell was cast on him. Heel saw that next to his younger brother were the rest of the students of the Elite Academy of Magic, who did everything not to kill the demon, but to cripple it. Heel, standing behind the next wall, was hiding. Fear enveloped him, because he understood that he would not be able to compete with those who were so good at magic and studied it at the academy. Hearing all the people laughing, the young man squinted so as not to see what was happening. Lopez was badly hurt again, and Heel now blamed himself for it. As soon as the company left, the guy ran up to the demon and began to apologize to him for not protecting him from danger. The creature lay motionless on the ground. From that day on, Heel nursed and tried to ease the demon's pain every time. However, no matter how hard the young man tried, he did not have enough strength to save Lopez. And Oren and his company came again and again to show their superiority. The young man also still could not open the lock on the demon's neck, however. If it were not for the guy, Lopez would have died long ago from the injuries inflicted on him. During one of the other people's training sessions, Oren was surprised that Heel did not just sit on the sidelines, but came out to him and his company. The prince was wondering why his brother had come. The young man, stuttering, began to ask Oren to stop training on the demon and let him go free, because the older brother no longer wanted to share the pain with his friend and wished him the best. Stretching his palm back, Oren motioned for one of the guys from his company to hand him gloves. Heel didn't dodge, so his younger brother slapped him hard in the face. The young man with blonde hair reminded his brother that they were from the royal family, so Heel not only spied on Oren, but also wanted to protect the demon. The guy did not stand on ceremony with his older brother and, threatening him with magic, demanded to get out of his way, or he would burn him along with the demon. Upon hearing this, Heel begged Oren, while the people around him laughed at the situation and saw his superiority over a member of the royal family. Then something happened that Heel did not expect. Oren raised his hands and said that his brother could do whatever he wanted, because they were relatives anyway and had to listen to each other. Not believing what was happening, Heel asked if he had heard everything correctly, to which Oren replied that he was already tired of training on the creature, so his older brother could pick him up. Delighted, the young man immediately stopped, because his younger brother told him to take the demon if he could take off his collar. Oren repeated that the demon can only be taken away when Heel frees him from the collar, because if he does not do this, the prince will destroy him if the demon does not leave the capital in 10 seconds. Heel tried to explain to his brother that he couldn't do it, no matter how hard he tried. But Oren didn't care, and he started counting down. The young man used magic to open locks over and over again, but all his attempts were in vain, and the people standing by the poison were having fun watching the helplessness of a member of the royal family. Lopez smiled for the last time in his short life, before Oren's countdown stopped at 0. The prince smiled, because he knew that this would happen. Exactly 10 seconds later, the demon was destroyed, and Heel remained sitting next to the body of his former friend, not believing that he could not do anything to save him. As he left, Oren said again that his older brother was pathetic and useless, because he was unable to help someone he wanted so much, which is why the demon burned down. Clenching his fists, the young man only thought about how much he hated his younger brother, so he tried to attack him, but the shield accompanying the prince prevented him from doing so. Oren calmly asked why Heel was acting like this, because he was to blame for what happened. The older brother cried and asked why the prince did this to Lopez. Turning abruptly, Oren spat out a question to which the answer was already obvious to everyone, because no one doubted that Heel would not even be able to touch his younger brother's body. Returning to the present, Heel ended the story by saying that he later woke up in a hospital bed, and after that he was completely banished from the kingdom to this island. Holding a small jar in his hands, the guy added that he had saved Lopez's ashes because he had become his friend, and he could not keep his promise and protect him from the one who killed him. After listening to the young man's story, the princess said that everything was not as Heel thought, because he was not a useless person at all, since he always helped the inhabitants of the island, real, and before that he tried to help Lopez. Crying, Rihanna said that Heel always tried his best to help everyone who needed it, which means he could not be a useless person in any way. When he saw that the girl was crying, the young man became worried and wondered why he had told his story at all right now. The princess began to apologize for her reaction, but she was very offended that the guy had passed, because he was good. Handing Rihanna a handkerchief from his backpack so that she would calm down a little, the young man wondered if he had done the right thing by telling about his past princess, because her reaction was quite emotional. However, doubts quickly left the guy's head, because he trusted the girl with dark hair and knew that sooner or later he should have told her about it anyway, so that she would know important information about her friend. After walking some distance forward, the couple found themselves in a place that looked more like a flower meadow, as they saw a lot of flowers everywhere, which literally did not allow them to pass by without paying attention. After examining them more closely, the girl noticed that these were exactly the flowers that grew in Rihanna's homeland, which means that her seeds, which she sowed earlier, were able to germinate, which once again confirmed how strong the sunstone was. Looking at how much fun Real had running around a large space, Heel smiled, because he was worried about his safety in this place. The girl decided to tell the young man that she thought about the situation with Lopez. Rihanna urged Heel not to forget that if he was in trouble, not only the girl, but all the other inhabitants of the island would come to his aid, because all creatures respected him and understood how he tried not only for himself, but also for them. Although Heel had experienced many unpleasant events in his life in the past, now there were those who would not leave him alone and would support him in any situation, no matter what it was. Heel thanked the princess for her words, which encouraged him. After Varys studied the tree, he learned that its leaves could make a good ointment and tea, as well as a good juice. But depending on the number of leaves, a headache or drowsiness may appear. And the branches of the tree were not only very light, but also very durable, so they could be compared to orichalcum. Having found out this, they tried to make cuttings for pickaxes from them. Noticing that the sun was sinking, Hill said that he needed to take a break and have dinner, to which Fuller replied that she was not tired. The young man thought that, most likely, the branches of the tree also reduced fatigue. The huge tree gave a blessing to all living beings on the island, and later, looking at its flowering, Heel waited for the fruits to appear on it and the orcs to help harvest. Life on the island stopped getting better and better, because resources and knowledge increased. So before going to bed, Heel always thought about what to do the next day to make his place of residence even more favorable. Waking up at night from the fact that the puppy was whining, the young man approached him and asked what happened to him, because he didn't look well. Later, all his friends came down to Heel's room, who became worried because they heard Riel crying. Rhianna took the animal in her arms, and the young man assumed that he had just had a nightmare. However, the puppy looked like it was in pain, and Heel noticed, looking at his left eye, that there was some kind of strange mark in it, which clearly had not been there before. After a few seconds, a bright glow appeared in the room, which blinded everyone present as they looked at the puppy from which it came. In the next moment, a sparkling thread appeared near the left eyes of all those gathered, like lightning, as if linking Heel and his comrades for a moment so that they could see what was needed. Suddenly, someone's memories appeared in front of the company's eyes, as if they were living these moments themselves. A storm was raging at sea, and the ship they were on was gradually collapsing. There were many dead on the ship, in whom Heel recognized those whom he and the orcs had fished out of the sea some time ago. The scepter that belonged to Riel's mother was also visible. She was injured, but tried to maintain a protective dome that prevented the ship from sinking completely. But no one could help her, because only fallen warriors who died from a large monster were nearby. However, the queen of the tribe could not hold the defense for a long time. At some point, the dome was destroyed and a ray hit the ship, breaking not only the woman's staff but also hitting her, significantly wounding her body. Looking back, Rexel's mother seemed to say goodbye to everything that was dear to her and activated the seal, using magic for the last time. Since there was no choice and even more chance of victory, the woman jumped right into the mouth of the monster that attacked her ship, fearlessly realizing her hopelessness and knowing that she would die right now. After the company saw Leviathan, they immediately returned to the room they were in. Heel immediately asked if everyone had seen the same thing he had. It was clear from the reaction of the team that this was the case. No one doubted that the monster in the sea was Leviathan, which made the young man noticeably tense, because his strength, power, and size were really terrifying. After everyone calmed down, Heel asked the sage to examine the mark that appeared on the puppy's eye to understand how it could affect all of them at once, moving into the events of the day in which his mother died. Varys replied that he was not familiar with such an ability, because it gave outsiders clairvoyance. But the old man added that he knew that this was called the Eye of God, so they were able to see what happened in the past. Remembering again the last moment when the queen was alive, Heel realized that because of the power of clairvoyance, the puppy was able to convey the circumstances of his mother's death without realizing it. Because he was still too young, going out to the people, Heel learned that all the inhabitants of the island saw the same thing as the young man and the inhabitants of the house. Because of clairvoyance, the orcs became afraid of Leviathan, because he could attack their island one day. The men began to worry a lot about their families, so they began to ask the young man what they would need to do if a huge monster got to them and destroyed the island or all the orcs on it. The creatures panicked and started shouting over each other to get to the young man to ask him their question. Heel himself was in thought, because he did not know how to deal with the impending danger. After looking at the orcs, the only question that arose in the guy's mind was how he could now help the inhabitants of the island and protect them all from Leviathan. Seeing how confused the young man was, Alvin decided to help him a little and, opening his mouth, he shouted loudly at the large crowd, attracting all the attention to himself. The general looked very confident, which made the young man even scared, not expecting such a loud shout. Elvin turned to the crowd and asked why all the residents had sad faces, because they had to remember what difficulties they overcame. The orc also added that if the inhabitants only oppress, then their leader will not be able to do anything to help them. Looking at Heel, Alvan smiled hinting that the guy would come to his senses. Heel decided to heed the mute advice and told the orcs to calm down and listen to him. The guy said that even though Leviathan might attack them, they should not panic, but should better prepare for battle. The young man believed that if they all joined forces, they would be able to resist any monster. So he urged them to lend him all their strength. There was a commotion in the place where the orcs had gathered, which signaled that their morale had not been squandered, and they believed in what their leader was telling them. After a while, the team gathered indoors, and no one knew what they should do, because Heel said they would cope with everything, but he did not know how. After the guy saw the legendary fight with his own eyes, he realized that his magic would not work against Leviathan, so he decided to turn to Map. As soon as the young man asked the creature the question of what kind of weapon could at least injure such a monster, Map fell silent and frowned, because he did not know this yet. Varys said that all they had to do was avoid a collision with the monster. He also couldn't imagine how the monster's huge body could fit deep into the cave, and also thought that the large hall in which they found the golems could be an excellent shelter. Elvan decided to ask what would happen to the island if it was attacked by Leviathan, and also offered to leave it so as not to sink with it. However, Heel replied that he had some kind of plan. When he came to one of the caves, Heel looked at its ceiling and realized that he should do what he had been putting off for some time, especially since he was not alone. Gripping the pickaxe harder in his hand, the young man knew that the moment had come, after which the truth hidden on their island would be revealed to him and the rest of the inhabitants. Earlier, returning to the conversation about some kind of plan, Heel said that he decided to get new materials, because they had been on the island all this time, and the deeper the mining progressed, the better the stones they found. The guy noted that Sheol was full of secrets and riddles, and also suggested that something might be waiting for them below, which would be able to resist Leviathan by force, and even be able to destroy it. Heel, having uttered his monologue, doubted himself, but Rhianna supported him, and the sage added that then it was necessary to act and try to use Riel's powers. Although the puppy could not control his powers, his clairvoyance ability could help everyone to explore the caves more effectively. When the team first set off, Full suggested that Hill use Recall. The puppy was sleeping peacefully in a backpack, and while the young man was trying to wake him up, Full continued to help along with the spiders, who were actively using pickaxes. The whole island rallied for a common goal and began to strenuously build defenses in order to repel Leviathan. There were many trees on the territory that had grown, thanks to Yggdrasil's blessing. The work was going fast, so the construction of the defense progressed rapidly, and the orcs acted harmoniously with each other. When the guy was in the cave, the puppy suddenly woke up in his backpack and ran somewhere. But later it turned out that he just wanted to go to the toilet. Riel had been rather gloomy lately, but his abilities helped him see the location of the right stones. Sometimes the animal found something by itself, but even if there was no progress, everyone thanked the puppy for his help. So a few weeks passed, and one day the puppy suddenly began to dig in one place. Looking at the place where the puppy was digging, Heel did not see anything special, but he doubted if everything was in order. Coming closer, the young man still decided to check it out. Hitting the right place with a pickaxe, he began to dig carefully, but the ground under the guy collapsed, scaring Fool. The girl came closer to the pit and asked if everything was okay with the young man, to which Heel replied that he was fine, but he found an unexpected passage underground. However, what surprised the young man the most was the huge golem sitting motionless right in front of him. After looking at the golem more closely, the young man realized that he would not be able to stand up because he lacked an important detail that could revive him. Heel was surprised because there was a large golem in front of him, but he did not have a core that would activate it, and he himself was most likely made of orichalcum, as it seemed at first glance. However, the weapon standing next to the golem attracted the most attention. The silver sword was beautiful, but it scared Funalar, who had already managed to approach the guy. When the young man touched the sword, Heel was surprised at how strong it was. At the same time, at the forge, while Map was forging another weapon, he heard a strange sound, and at that time Heel realized that he could not break the sword, wondering what it was actually made of. After the young man struck the gun, Map decided to quickly approach him, which scared the young man, who did not expect this. Heel turned around abruptly and was amazed at how quickly Map ran up to him. His legs were giving way, and later the man began to behave strangely at all. Map fell, but he did it on purpose, as if he saw something that inspired him with unknown admiration. Later, Map began to bow to the sword at all, which surprised Full and Heel, after which the young man noted that the man was much more active than usual. Next, Map picked up the sword and began to carry it out of the pit. Following the man with his eyes, Heel assumed that Map wanted to recycle the gun, because it seemed to him a very valuable material. Running up to the orcs, Map began to show them what to do in order to melt the sword he had brought as soon as possible. Heel approached one of the workers and asked what happened to the man, to which they explained to him that Map had asked to raise the temperature because it was not enough for melting. Rihanna, who came up, also decided to ask what the found sword was so useful for. Heel asked the girl to help them and apply her magic. When the couple got close to the stove, the young man told the princess to add flame to speed up the heating process. The young man's plan worked. The furnace began to work much faster, which is why the orcs began to shout that it was worth carrying the sword immediately, because it was not so easy to keep the fire going. When all the preparations were completed, the orcs began to melt the sword under the guidance of Map, pouring metal into molds, after which it was necessary to immediately forge new tools and implements. It turned out that the material that was mined was mithril. It was the hardest and most imbued with magic of all and was capable of killing gods, which greatly amazed Heel, because this is exactly what he was looking for. Out of joy, the young man picked up Riel in his arms and told him that they had finally succeeded. The guy did not doubt Map, because he forged an excellent weapon. As a result, the construction of the defensive wall was completed pretty soon, which all the inhabitants of the island were happy about. The wall even looked like a fortress, but that was exactly what was needed, since Leviathan was too strong. The opponent of Heel and his comrades was a legendary beast, so everyone should prepare many options for the fight, because everything can happen in a way that no one expected. This is how the first battle of Sheol began. After nightfall, Heel decided to walk through the territory underground, but saw Alvin, who was talking about something with Riel. The young man wanted to come closer, but he was stopped by a girl who asked him not to say anything so as not to spoil the moment. Meanwhile, Alvin seemed to gather his strength to say something. The orc bowed and apologized to the puppy for insulting his mother. It turned out that this moment had been bothering him for a long time, and he felt guilty. Alvin added that, as the general of the tribe, he understood that the queen was an excellent warrior who sacrificed himself for the sake of his army. The man stroked the animal and smiled. Alvin promised that they would definitely avenge his mother, and the couple who overheard the conversation tried not to give themselves away, but thought the same thing. The puppy did not understand the words, but touched the orc with his paw. The animal got in the eyes, so the man screamed, but it was a common thing. Everyone understood that as soon as Leviathan appeared, they would be able to rely only on themselves and fight. The next moment, bells rang outside, so Heel quickly ran out to ask what happened, because Leviathan couldn't have appeared so quickly. Alvin replied that it wasn't a monster. When they got closer to the edge of the wall, they all saw that ships had appeared in the sea. 2 ships were rapidly approaching the shore. Vales, approaching the young man, handed him a telescope so that he could get a better look at those who were swimming towards them. After seeing the flag that was on the ship, Heel realized who it was. Elvin confirmed that the flag belonged to the orcs who attacked them, which meant that there were survivors among them who wanted revenge. However, what happened next was that the observers did not expect. The ships began to fight with someone at sea, but it was not visible from the shore with whom exactly. Heel began to bark loudly, and his clairvoyance ability was activated again. Remembering how the puppy's mark helped them, Heel immediately thought of something bad. Peering into the sea, Heel realized that an incredible amount of magical power was emanating from the water. The waves were rising stronger and stronger on the water. Everyone present was surprised and scared, because the one the ships were fighting could be the one from whom they were so quickly building defenses on the island. The next moment, one of the ships was broken in half. The monster that attacked the orcs was able to destroy an entire ship with one blow. A huge black shadow appeared from under the water and rushed into the sky with a terrifying scream. She revealed the wrath of the seas, terrifying everyone who saw it of what would happen next. The second ship, which remained afloat, continued to use cannons to repel the monster's attack, however. Because of the waves, it was difficult for the cores to break through the water to reach the target. After the projectiles reached the monster's body, they couldn't even slow it down, as armor seemed to grow on it to protect the monster. Of the 2 ships, only one remained, but it was difficult for him to defend himself to withstand the attacks. The onlookers watched the battle unfold and didn't know what to do. The orcs gradually began to panic, but suddenly an axe flew into the bell, which made a loud sound to calm the crowd. Alvin shouted and began to urge everyone not to stand on Monsieur Her and prepare for battle, as well as to take up positions in the same sequence as in training. The orc added that he wasn't going to help anyone, he just wanted to destroy Leviathan. Hill ordered Falaine to take care to escort all the inhabitants to a safe cave. The girl agreed and asked to promise her that the young man would survive and not give up. The young man promised and showed that he would be fine. His comrades did not despair either, and smiled to reassure those who were afraid of the upcoming battle. Varys also did not stand aside and began to command the orcs, ordering them to prepare a ballista. Everyone got to work and passed instructions to each other in order to prepare for the defense faster. The ballista was prepared in a short time. The orcs positioned it on the edge of the protective wall and sent it to the sea to fire after receiving the order. Alvin shouted that the mithril tip made by Map should have pierced the monster's body because the material was very strong and could pierce anything. Pointing the tip towards the sea, the orc who controlled the ballista shouted for it to be moved 6 units to the left and 3 units higher. Due to the fact that it was impossible to miss, clarity was a priority. As soon as the monster got closer to the ship, Alvin saw it and shouted for the orcs to immediately open fire and fire a shot. The arrow flew rapidly and gained speed, although it was heavy, but the material from which it was made allowed it to be quite effective. The monster did not expect that something would fly at him from the ground, so he could not react quickly to the arrow fired. However, he still noticed her when she almost reached him. In the next moment, something happened that Heel and his team did not expect to see. The monster quickly rounded the arrow, letting it pass by itself. No one had foreseen such an outcome, and for a moment doubt was sown about victory. Heel screamed, asking if he had seen everything correctly, because the huge monster had dodged the arrow too deftly and was too agile. However, it was impossible to despair, so it was worth trying one more time. Cannonballs did not deal damage to the monster, and he deftly dodged arrows, so it was worth thinking about other tactics. It was also clear that the monster understood the danger of the arrows, so it was necessary to attack her, but in a different way. As the monster realized the danger that threatened him from the inhabitants of the island, he began to approach closer to them. Heel commanded that the second arrow be loaded immediately. The young man also said that he and the golems would detain the monster, so Rhianna had to prepare to use magic. The warriors numbered 10 and 11 needed to activate the ice, while the others needed to activate the wind. To slow down or push away the monster, the golems created a strong blizzard, using several elements. However, this was only necessary to prepare the arrow. The plan worked, because the element was able to withstand a huge force, but it only acted as a barrier in front of a real defense. However, the vortex did not act too effectively, because the monster continued to approach closer and closer, so the sage noted that magic did not cope well with the power of the creature. The monster stopped at some place in the sea, frozen, as the golems were able to freeze it with the help of wind and ice. Heel said that everything was going the way it needed to, so they should keep freezing the water next to the monster, because that way he wouldn't be able to dodge the arrow. However, the monster realized that if it could not move, it was able to attack the island not with its body, but with attacks from its mouth. The young man also noticed that the scales gradually began to defrost the ice binding the monster. In order not to waste time, the monster nevertheless began to prepare to attack the island with its beam. The young man ordered the golems to increase the radius of the shield to prevent the monster from hitting or at least reflecting the beam. It was already impossible to stop the creature. It had almost finished preparing to strike, so it could only wait for the moment. After a while, the monster opened its mouth and sent a powerful beam towards a small island. Due to the force of the impact, an explosion occurred, which caused significant damage to the defense of the residents. Even though the shield was trying to hold back the blow, the golems were pierced by lightning, and a retaliatory strike could not be made until the monster stopped attacking. Heel understood that very soon, the beam would reach the territory that was located behind the fortress wall, and more effort was needed. The beam did not stop for a long time, as the monster put a lot of effort into destroying the barrier and destroying the island from which it was shot at. After some time, a strong explosion occurred, which signaled that the team had a chance to try to shoot an arrow at their opponent one more time. After the end of the next phase of the battle, the golem shields were destroyed, and Heel slightly sank to the ground, as he spent a lot of energy to use magic. However, the opponent did not give up. He decided to go underwater again in order to get to the island faster. Rhianna asked Alvan if the ballista was ready, to which the orc replied that it was. The guy was thinking about whether the creature would be able to dodge the arrow again. After firing another projectile, Heel hoped that this time, due to the close range, the monster would not be able to simply dodge it. All those who participated in the defense were closely watching what would happen next, and hoped that the new arrow would reach the target and hit the monster. Everything turned out as planned. The arrow was able to pierce the creature's scales because the young man asked the princess to cast an invisibility spell on her. Because of this, the monster could not notice her in time to dodge. The orcs were happy that they were finally able to hit the enemy, but Alvin shouted that they could not relax and should immediately prepare the next projectile for a new strike. It also turned out that a rope was tied to the arrow, but it was not simple, but made of spider thread and steel cable to prevent the monster from going underwater and swimming away. Heal ordered the 5th and 6th golems to attack. The warriors began to obey the order and activated abilities that allowed them to attack from a long distance. The golems managed to bind the monster so that it could not move. But the enemy was not going to just wait for the moment when they would start attacking again. The enemy began to break free, which is why the golems could not stand still for a long time. Moving backwards, the monster began to break the gears that controlled the ballista, so Heal shouted to Alvin that they would not last long. The orc ordered his subordinates to align the ballista so that she could direct the projectile directly at her head, because this way it was possible to win more effectively. However, something strange happened. Some creatures began to appear from under the monster's scales, attacking those nearby with their liquid. Heal saw that the golems began to fail, because some creatures were hitting them. The young man did not understand what was going on. Later, everyone saw that the warriors were attacked by sea pursuers. Small creatures began to bite the golems so that they would stop working. The beetles parasitized large marine life and, as it turned out, hid on the monster. After a while, Heal saw that golem number 1 was literally being taken apart by the creatures. Elvin ordered his team to try to shoot down the small creatures with a bow until they destroyed all the golems. However, the beetles could crawl along the walls and decided to climb to the defensive fortress, while the monster began to gnaw the chains that bound it. Grabbing the chains tighter, the monster decided to knock down all the golems and threw them into the wall, completely freeing himself. Hill swore and lost his head in a moment. After the opponent was freed, horns began to grow on his back, which was greatly surprised by those who saw it. After examining everything in more detail, Heal realized that the horns were not like those from which the monster had previously fired. In the next moment, rays began to be released from the horns that quickly grew on the back of the monster, which were directed at the island. Heal was very worried that the attacks would overtake everyone who was on the fortress. The young man activated his magic and shouted to everyone nearby to hide under the shield, because they were being attacked again. The golems tried to maintain the shield, although their forces were significantly reduced, and all the others who fought were forced to obey the healer and hide under the dome so as not to get hurt. Rihanna helped the guy to keep the defense, but it was hard for her, so Heal tried to cheer her up so that she would not give up, because now they could not feel sorry for themselves. After a while, the attacks stopped, and everyone thought that the monster was finished. However, this was not the case at all. It turned out that the monster only decided that he needed to choose another fight, and instead of using the rays, he decided to beat with his tail. Heal noticed it late and did not have time to react. And also because the barrier was removed, it was clear that the monster could now destroy the protective wall. The next moment, a blow occurred. The enemy's tail hit right at the place where the ballista was standing, which was controlled by the orcs. Everything began to collapse, and the structure began to collapse, sinking into the water. There were no residents in sight. The residents who were hiding in the bunker were very panicked and scared of what was happening outside, because there were some noises and explosions upstairs. No one understood what was going to happen next, so it was difficult to remain calm. Adults tried to calm the children who could not stop crying. One of the children asked if they would lose their home again, to which his mother replied that Heal would protect them along with the others, and the island would be saved from the monster. Due to the monster's attack, the defensive wall was destroyed, so the young man could not quickly move away. He cared about his team, but did not think at all about the actual safety. In order for the young man not to hit too hard, he was caught by Seville, whom the guy later thanked. After getting up, Heal realized that he didn't have much time, so he ordered the 6th and 7th golems to protect all residents. However, as soon as the young man looked around, he realized that everything was destroyed, and there was no one next to him. The whole squad had disappeared somewhere, but no cries for help were heard. Heil began to be enveloped in panic. He began to shout the names of his comrades in order to find at least someone, but the only ones who came out from under the rubble were the creatures that were hiding on the monster. There were monsters in front of the young man, as well as the creature that destroyed the wall. The situation looked hopeless, but Heal had no thoughts of running away or giving up, because he could not imagine any other outcome than victory. The young man knew that he had almost no chance, because the sea pursuers did not stop attacking. Using magic, the young man attacked the creatures with lightning to clear his way. The monsters were not destroyed. As soon as a few seconds passed, the creatures rose and continued to attack the young man, who realized that he was beginning to lose strength. By activating the shield, Heal repelled attacks and also protected Seal, who was nearby. However, the creatures began to make their way. Suddenly, someone shouted for Seal to run away as soon as possible. Hill heard someone's voice and realized that someone was there after all. Tui, a girl, appeared in front of the young man, who helped the guy repel the attack of the attacking creatures. The princess skillfully used the weapon in her hand and in one fell swoop destroyed all the monsters that got close to the guy. Heel was very tired. He fell to the ground, but looked at the one who helped him and immediately recognized Rihanna, after which he was glad that she was all right. It turned out that the girl was able to defend herself using only a tool for cultivating the land. Heel managed to get up and shout to the princess. The princess did not turn around and began to tell the creatures that she would not allow them to continue attacking the young man, because she would do everything to help him. Having fully realized everything, Heel shouted that he was very glad that everything was fine with Rihanna, and the girl asked if everything was okay with the guy. The next moment, arrows flew from afar, which finished off the rest of the creatures. Heel immediately turned around to look at the place where some movements had begun. The rest of Heel's surviving comrades began to get out from under the rubble. The golems helped them not to die under the rubble of the defensive wall. Varys ordered everyone to keep shooting and thus protect Heel from afar. As the archers continued to attack, the golems began to lift heavy stones to release warriors who could fight with guns in close combat. The orcs ran into the attack, led by Alvin. They understood that they were fighting not only for themselves, the princess, or their boss. They knew that their island and peaceful existence were at stake, so no one fled the battlefield. While the Okri attacked with guns, the golems helped with magic. The general, approaching Hill, apologized for being late, but the young man replied that he was just glad that everyone had survived and reunited with him. However, the next moment, the territory was again hit by a fiery stream that came from the mouth of the monster. The golems standing on the edge of the defensive wall were destroyed, so the monster was able to get even further. The creature was crawling, gradually approaching the inhabitants to put an end to the battle that had been going on for quite a long time. The monster was too big, it didn't stop attacking, and it seemed like nothing could stop it. The sage noted that his strength was so great that he easily broke the largest golem. Heel replied that there was nothing left for them but to use a plan that seemed too dangerous and risky to Rhianna. The young man knew that the risks were great, but Leviathan came too close to them, so it was necessary to act quickly. The princess didn't mind anymore, she just took the guy's hand. The young man did not know why she did it. The next moment, some kind of glow formed around the couple, which meant that the girl was sharing her powers with a guy who clearly attached great importance to this. Rihanna added that even though she didn't have much mana, she understood that the young man would need it more, and she also asked him to promise that he would win this battle for the sake of everyone who lived on this island. Heel replied that he would do everything possible to fulfill the promise, because he knew that not only the girl and his team hoped for him, but also everyone who was hiding in the bunker, because among them were both adults and children who wanted to live. Looking at the huge monster, everyone noticed that it was preparing to attack again. It seemed as if it had not spent any strength at all. After a while, it actually launched a fireball into the crowd that had gathered at the fortress. Due to the fact that the battle was not ending, Heel decided to distract Leviathan so that a plan that could help the inhabitants win could be realized. While the young man was running away in the other direction, he shouted at the monster to follow him. Also, since Rihanna sacrificed her powers in order for the young man to have more of them, the young man used lightning magic to anger the monster and make it chase only a human. The monster did not pay attention to the fact that it was destroying its own allies. Heel, riding on a spider, asked Terran not to stop and run as fast as he could, and the young man himself activated a shield to protect against sudden attacks. The princess was worried about the guy and shouted to him that all his team could do was believe in him and wait for the right moment. Alvin said that he was not going to just wait for something, but wanted to help the young man. The general climbed onto the ballista and ordered it to be prepared for attack, gradually pulling it out from under the rubble. However, the arrow needed for this was also under the rubble. Varys also said that the winch was broken, so it would not be possible to pull the rope. The orc replied that Heel risked his life for everyone, so, as a true warrior, Alvin could not just watch and do nothing. I didn't have enough strength, but Map came up to the orc, who began to help the general pull the rope to load the projectile. The men tried their best to do what they had in mind as soon as possible. At the same time, Heel, controlling the spider, continued to distract him. The monster blocked the escape route and began throwing stones at the enemy. However, suddenly, from somewhere, cannonballs flew at the monster. Turning around, the young man saw that from the surviving ship, which they had saved by luring the monster to the island, the orcs opened fire and began to help the inhabitants. While Leviathan was distracted, he was hit by an arrow launched by Map and Alvin. Taking advantage of the fact that the monster was blinded, Heel shouted at Terran to use his web. After the spider, using the web, was able to jump to the other side of the area, Heel raised his hand up, in which he held a weapon, and thought that the time had come. It was a special sign that the young man was giving to Funo, who was watching the battle from another place with the help of Riel. The mark helped in the battle again, and the animal seemed to have already got used to it. The puppy, using his tag, helped the girl to wait for the signal. After seeing that Heel was ready, Full began to use a pickaxe to destroy the cave, which was located under the place where the monster was located. The rest of the spiders helped Fro, and they managed to cut through everything that was needed to fulfill the previously agreed plan. While the Leviathan was unable to move, the ground beneath it began to crumble. Even though the huge monster had a huge amount of strength, it couldn't resist when it was attacked from all sides. Just because of its large size, the monster's body began to fall down, because Heel specifically discussed with Fertile where she would need to make blows with a pickaxe to create a space between the surface and the ground. Leviathan began to fall down, falling into a deep hole. There was nothing he could do, because everything was happening too fast, and his wounds did not allow him to resist. Hill went to the edge of the pit and said that they had prepared in advance for the fact that the ballista might fail. Having dug a cave at great depth, the young man deliberately forced the enemy to get to the designated place. When Full was able to demolish the supporting columns that held the trap, everything went as planned. Next, the young man took out his weapon from the case, having previously covered the cave with something, and prepared to attack. Hill was holding Map's best work, a mithril pickaxe. Lifting the boulders into the sky, Heel jumped to activate the device. A sign appeared nearby that asked if the guy wanted to start the dripping process. A large monster stuck in a trap released a new stream of fire towards the guy. However, it was injured and did not have the powers that it originally had. The young man used a shield and rapidly fell towards the enemy. Shouting with all his might, Heel ordered the king of the cave to start activating the pickaxe, so a sign appeared next to it again, which announced that the instructions had been accepted and the dripping process was beginning. The next moment there was a collision. The young man reached the place where he needed to hit, and his pickaxe helped him do it with such force that he did not give the monster a chance to somehow show resistance. Using all his strength, the young man believed that the king of the cave would be able to help him accomplish his plans and win, because this was the last option to end the battle. The metal from which the pickaxe was made, as the legend said, was even capable of killing gods, so the Leviathan had to fall under the onslaught of the young man's power in conjunction with the weapon. The whole guy's team froze in anticipation. The general was worried, because even though he had done everything in his power, he could not help the young man anymore. Rihanna, Varys, and the others also watched the glow that came from the pit that Leviathan had fallen into. Full Lies, who was next to the spiders helping her in the execution of the second phase of the plan, tried to move away to a safe distance so that the shockwave would not touch her, as well as Riantel, whom she held in her arms. Heel didn't doubt himself. The blow with the pickaxe fell directly on the enemy's body, which seemed incredibly durable, because no other guns and shells could split it. Heel, having reached the Leviathan's head, hit it with all the force he had. The monster's body began to collapse and crack from the attack, which made it clear that the end was near. Since the monster was already wounded, the last blow signaled the end. Everyone who participated in this terrible battle stared dumbfounded at the place where the pit formed after they attacked Leviathan, and then it became much larger because of the force with which Hariel hit the snake with a mithril pickaxe. Hela, who pierced Leviathan with his mithril pickaxe, clenched his teeth from the strain, trying to stay on the monster's body, due to the fact that after his blow the snake began to wriggle, and its scales began to rapidly crack and burst. Sweat broke out on Heel's forehead from the strain. He clenched his teeth even harder and furrowed his brows, trying to keep from falling. Looking at the death throes of Leviathan, Heel realized that his hit was accurate and fatal. The goblins, who stood on the edge of the pit, rejoiced, because Heel managed to get into Leviathan. They shouted triumphantly that the legendary serpent had now been defeated. The Leviathan stopped writhing and began to fall deeper into the pit. When the Leviathan fell, Heel jumped off it and caught on a rock. Being in this position, he exclaimed that they had succeeded and they had defeated Leviathan. Suddenly, something made the young man open his eyes wide and look down. Leviathan, who they thought had been defeated, suddenly raised his head and shouted loudly right towards Heel, who was desperately holding onto the stone. Because of this scream, Heel could not hold onto the stone and hung on only one cable. The roar of the snake was so loud that it echoed off the walls of the cave and flew out. Everyone who was on the street covered their ears with their hands to somehow escape from this roar. Vari assumed out loud that it was a death scream. At the same time, Hela, who had detached himself from the stone, began to fall further into the cave to the monster, but he still would not have crashed, because he was insured. As he fell, the young man opened his mouth in a daze, because he realized that the monster's scream echoed further into the cave. Having stopped screaming, Leviathan fell breathlessly to the bottom of this cave. Heel also stopped falling down and now hung limply on the cable directly over the body of the Leviathan he had defeated. At the same moment, the cave began to collapse from that scream. Varys noticed this and began shouting to everyone that the cave was collapsing. At the same moment, General L called out to Terran and shouted for him to get Heel out of this cave as soon as possible. Suddenly, Princess Rhianna, standing next to Varys, jumped. The girl fearlessly, without thinking at all about her life, pushed off the ground and jumped right into this cave to save Heel from the blockage. The goblins, crowding on the edge, called out in fright to the girl, who was not afraid for her life. Jumping into the cave, she called out to Terran and stretched out her hand to him. The monster understood her request and shot at the princess with its web. Rhianna grabbed onto this strand of the web and flew straight towards Gil, who was in danger. Once she was next to Hela, the princess called out to him. She told the young man to hold on to her so that they could get him out of this cave. Hela himself was hanging on one cable, his head down and mumbling softly in pain. Realizing that Rhianna had suddenly somehow found herself next to him, Heel raised his head heavily to her and croaked for her to run, leaving him here, because otherwise she could have died with him. Tears of despair came to Rhianna's eyes from his words. Because she did not want Heel to die at all, she shouted that she would never leave Heel here. Despite the fact that she too could be in danger and die under the rubble, Rhianna picked up the young man with one hand and threw his arm over her shoulder to hold him, and began to rise, exclaiming that she had promised him. Rhianna wanted to say something else, but suddenly the walls of the cave began to collapse rapidly, and a whole bunch of stone boulders flew down, right at Rhianna and Hela. Because of this, they both started in fright. At the same moment, a large creature covered in dust appeared through the dust. It glanced at Rhianna and Hela. When Rhianna saw this creature, her eyes widened in shock, and Hela, due to pain and fatigue, could only frown. When the stones were almost upon them, to their mutual surprise, the furry creature grabbed them both and began to lift them up, pushing off the stones flying down with his feet. Stunned, Rhianna asked where he was taking them. Both men ended up on the back of the wolf-like creature as it galloped rapidly upward, pushing off with all four paws. Clutching tightly at the stranger's fur to keep from falling, Rhianna asked about who he was. Suddenly, a huge boulder appeared in front of them, which, unlike the others, would not be so easy to circumvent. People screamed in fright, but the stranger told them not to be afraid. Just at this moment, another such creature appeared. That creature rushed right at that boulder and rammed it with its body, causing that stone to shatter into pieces. Thanks to this, the first creature managed to safely pull people out of the cave. The wounded Heel, who could only stand on his feet thanks to the fact that Rhianna supported him by the arm, thanked these strangers who saved them from death at the very last moment, and then asked about who they really were. One of these monsters said that Heel had managed to defeat a huge Leviathan, which meant that there were heroes among the people. The two strangers who saved them from being killed under the rubble turned out to be two large kobolds. The kobold with the white muzzle turned to the second one and said that they did not care about Heel, calling the second kobold brother. The white man said that he could smell His Highness's scent from the hill. The young man opened his eyes wide and shuddered when he realized what was the matter. The first kobold turned to Heikel and Rhianna and apologized to them, saying that he and his brother would like to learn something from them. He asked if people on this island had seen a small box containing a small kobold. At the same moment, Valis, General Alvin, and Map, who were urgently looking for their head and the princess, jumped out from behind the hill. But when they saw two kobolds, General L froze in amazement, because he had already known them once. The kobolds noticed Alvan and Valis, who ran up to them, and said that they had not seen them for a long time. Kobold said that he had heard that the tribe of these goblins had long been wiped off the face of the earth, but did not expect that any of them remained. Valis told Rhianna and Heikel that the two kobolds were named Ash and Hayfeen. They were from the tribe of Tiberius. They were the ones Alcmena had ordered to guard Lila. The kobolds were stunned that Valis knew their queen. Suddenly, little Lilu jumped out to the kobolds, chased by Fungal, who tried to stop her somehow. Ash and Hain stared in amazement when they saw that the snow-white puppy running towards them was Lilu, their princess. When Lilu ran up to the noisy crowd gathered in that place, Rhianna and Heel knelt down to try to catch her. Well, suddenly the kobolds also fell to their knees to bow to little Lila, and she froze in surprise. Bowing their heads, the kobolds said they were glad to see their princess in good health. They confessed and apologized to her for not being able to protect her. They said they were ready to humbly pay with their lives for the mistakes they had made. Rhianna and Heel looked at Lila with a soft smile, because she had finally found her relatives. The little princess herself squeaked and tilted her head questioningly. General Al turned to Ash and suspiciously asked about the reason for their visit. Ash was silent for a while, and then decided to tell everything anyway, and said that it would be stupid for them to lie. He said that the boat they were sailing on was sunk by a leviathan, and they lost track of the princess, so they drifted for a while. But after some time wandering around the sea on the wreckage of their ship, they were still rescued. The ones who saved them were the Kamu pirate orcs from the Horde of Corvus, who took them on their ship and brought them here. Suddenly, a goblin ran up to them and called out to General Al. He loudly announced that a boat was approaching the pirate ship. General L turned to his confidant and ordered him not to shoot at that boat without his signal. After that, Al turned to Ash and asked what all this meant, because he used to think that they were at odds with each other. Ash calmly replied that they just needed to meet those pirates to figure it all out. He said that the ship of those pirates who rescued them was well battered, so it was undesirable for him to stay at sea for a long time, and because of the shelling of their ship, they had no ammunition left at all, so they would be very easy to smash. Ash said that for this reason, he and Hain are asking all of them, as from themselves, to pardon these pirates. Upon hearing about this request, General L frowned, Vari and Foodle froze in surprise, and Rihanna and Hale looked down thoughtfully. After a while, when the pirates' boat finally landed, everyone was already waiting for them. The surprised Hale, who was leaning on Rihanna, was silent for a while due to surprise, and then introduced himself as Hale, the head of this place. The long-haired pirate, in response, introduced himself to him as Kisamo, the leader of the Horde of Corvus. He said that the battle with Leviathan was even more surprising for them, but they were even more surprised that an island inhabited by inhumans was ruled by a man. Heel stared in amazement at the orc Camo and his henchmen, who towered several meters above them all. Heel swallowed hard and thought about how these pirates were very big even for an orc. At the same time, Camo noticed Albii, who was standing behind Heel. He said it was big for a goblin. Camo realized that he was Albii, the leader of the Beldan clan. General L frowned and exclaimed that his name was Alvin now. He said that they would help these pirates, but despite this, they would not forget their old grudges. He asked the captain if he was ready to accept their help. Taking his sword out of its scabbard, Camus said that it was just fine. Since the Beldan tribe was here, he said it must be their fate. Seeing how he pulls out a weapon, the goblins immediately became alert and began to draw their weapons. Camus suddenly put his sword on the ground and said that he, Camus, the leader of the Horde of Corvus, was praying for the lives of his comrades. He clenched his jaw tightly and began to take off his hat. Camo knelt down. Submissively lowering his head, he pressed his hat to his chest and said that in return for saving his comrades, he would give his own life. Everyone present there gasped in shock. Caperimo talked about taking full responsibility for what happened to their tribe. In return for his head, he asks to let them at least repair their ship. The general nodded, closing his eyes, and said that this was the end of his life as the leader of these orcs. Fugel looked at her general in a daze, and Camo's assistant suddenly realized what was happening. He exclaimed that it wasn't their leader's fault. The orc looked over his captain's shoulder and exclaimed that the traitors had done it all, not them. Camo turned around and ordered Tom to be silent. Captain Camo indignantly asked his subordinate if he wanted to embarrass him even more. He replied that it was not so, but he did not want to look at it. How his captain dies. After hearing about the traitors, Heel asked in surprise. Tired of listening to this altercation, General Elvin got angry and shouted loudly for them to be silent. Rihanna and Hyle, who were standing next to him, covered their ears at his shout. Captain Kokomo and his assistant also stopped arguing and froze. Then Keho called out to Camo. Heel apologized to the captain for interrupting him, but he wanted to know everything. He asked Camo to let his assistant speak. The captain said nothing and clenched his teeth. His assistant realized that he could speak. He began to talk about how the orc Cloud was a deputy captain, as well as a traitor. He waited until the leader sailed, and then brazenly stole part of their entire fleet. Camo's assistant thought that Cloud had always been quite strange. He said that their leader's methods were too soft, and that the Horde of Corvus needed more glory and honor than it currently had. With his sweet speeches, Cloud lured most of the captain's associates to his side. The captain himself moved back as soon as he heard the news about this. But by that time, Cloud had already escaped, hanging the flags of their horde everywhere. Heel realized that, as it turns out, it wasn't Captain Camo himself who was behind all this, but Cloud. Captain Kamo's assistant exclaimed that this was indeed the case. Ash finally stopped just being silent and said that Leviathan appeared right in the middle of the battle, and then Cloud's troops were completely destroyed. Heel furrowed his brows because he realized that it was the bodies of the people from Cloud's army that they had seen in the water back then. Varys said it really looked like it. Ash closed his eyes and said that Captain Camus was the one who saved them at sea. The kneeling captain's face darkened when Al said that everything was pretty funny because Captain Camus's horde had always been engaged in piracy, but never attacked other factions for no apparent reason. Captain Camus got angry at Alvin's words and scratched the ground with his claws. He asked about what was wrong with it and what had changed. Gritting his teeth, he hissed that he just couldn't prevent all those attacks, which is why he couldn't quell that rebellion raised by Cloud, he exclaimed. That is why he is ready to take responsibility for all those acts as a leader. Digesting all that information, Heel frowned and looked down. Then Alvin spoke up. Grabbing his sword, he said that if Captain Camus could still rally his orcs, then their clan house would be intact. Alvin stood threateningly in front of the kneeling captain and began to draw his sword from its scabbard. He said that Camus would pay with his life for his deeds. Al asked if he had anything else to say. Obediently closing his eyes, Captain Camus said that it would even be funny for him to die at the hands of Elvan, the warrior of Beldan. When Elvan swung his sword, everyone in the audience flinched and tried to somehow stop the general. Thoggle also started up and called out to her father in despair, but it was too late because Alvin's sword was already descending. Everyone started and stared at that place in a daze. As a result, Elvin's sword did not hit its target, but only stuck into the ground right in front of Camus, who stared at this sword uncomprehendingly. Alvin turned to the captain and ordered him to take this sword in his hands. Gritting his teeth, Al said that he, Elvin, the general of the Beldan tribe, was challenging the leader of the horde of Corvus, Kenye, to a duel. Before the start of the duel, both opponents traditionally crossed their weapons and then went in opposite directions and stood expectantly opposite each other. Everyone around them stood alertly to the side, watching what was happening. They were stunned because they did not expect that El and Camus would arrange a deadly duel. Hyle, leaning on Rhianna's shoulder, was also watching. He wondered what the opponents' chances of defeating each other were. Alvin was very strong because he is a goblin general, but his opponent is the leader of the orcs, which means that he is most likely superior to Elam in strength. Gritting his teeth in pain, Heel raised his hand, intending to at least put a shield on Alvin because the chances were hardly on his side. But Rhianna intercepted the young man's hand, which did not allow him to put a shield. Heel turned to the girl in surprise and called out to him questioningly. Rhianna did not answer anything and only shook her head. Then Heel realized that his intervention was undesirable and stopped trying to help Al, deciding to just watch it. Holding the blade in front of him, Camus turned to Elvan and firmly said that he was ready to pay with his head for the death of the general's tribe. Camus raised his blade in front of his face and exclaimed that he swore that in a duel, General Elvan would not just take his life. The general grinned back at him and exclaimed that he agreed to such conditions. Alvin exclaimed that he was not going to retreat at all, and as a result, Camus' head would fall in the blink of an eye. From this attitude of both opponents, everyone around them became even more wary, because both opponents were serious and were not going to give in to each other so easily and give their lives. After this short conversation, both opponents took up fighting positions to decide their fates soon. They tightened their grip on the hilts of their weapons and strained their legs. After a couple of seconds, both opponents violently attacked each other. At the very beginning of the battle, Alvin swung and threw his battle axe directly towards Captain Camus, but he managed to react and crouch down, successfully dodging. After the attack, the axe began to return to its owner, but Camus knocked it down with something. When Ekval finally caught his axe, Camus realized that this was his lucky moment and decided to strike. He rushed to Alvan and hit him on the arm, which caused his axe to fly off to the side and sink into the ground. Despite this, Alvan managed to bounce away from Camus' blow. Heel opened his mouth in a daze. Both opponents acted so quickly that both he and almost none of the observers realized what had happened. Left with just one battle axe, Alvan became even more serious. He held up a second battle axe in front of him, preparing for another attack. At the same moment, Camus attacked him with his sword again, muttering that no one had ever dodged his sword like that before. When Camus attacked him again, Alvan managed to dodge his attack, but it grazed his cheek. Rhianna gasped in amazement. She said admiringly that Captain Camus was too fast, so his attacks were very difficult to predict. Someone exclaimed that Mr. Camus was just incredibly strong. Fuel, standing on the sidelines and excitedly watching her father fight to the death, clenched her hands into fists and nervously pressed them to her chest. At the same time, her father pulled the rope to retrieve the second axe. That axe was right behind Captain Camus's back at that moment. The observers gasped in shock when they realized what Alvin's plan was. Everything was calculated so that the axe would strike the stone from the back. He exclaimed that it was very mean. By that time, the axe was already nearby, so Camus turned around to fight it off. Alvin took advantage of this and attacked him, but he was forced to jump back because, to his surprise, Captain Camus managed to intercept the axe, flying at his back and throwing it towards Alvin, who opened his eyes in a daze. Attacking him with his sword again, Camus shouted to Alvin to choose what he would block in the end, because he could only block one attack. The general had to choose between his axe and the captain's sword. As a result, Alvin chose to dodge his axe and take a sword strike. Everyone present gasped in shock. Blood splattered to the sides, and Camus stared in amazement, not understanding what was happening. The captain's sword thrust pierced only Alvin's arm. The general grabbed Camus's arm with his wounded hand and said that he had fallen into his trap, squeezing the orc's hand harder. Alvin said that now he would not be able to swing his sword so easily. He croaked for the captain to surrender to him, but he suddenly grabbed his other hand. Camus was bigger than Alvin to detect which species he belonged to, so the goblin now had to push even harder. Camus said that it wasn't really him who got caught, but Alvin himself, who set up such a trap for him. From the strain, Alvin's legs crashed into the ground and violated its integrity. Putting more pressure on him with his weight, Camus told him not to be misled because of his condition. Camus said that he was an orc and would never lose to a goblin in battle. Camus put more pressure on Alvin, which made him clench his teeth. The captain exclaimed that he would break his opponent's arms. Almost everyone in the audience opened their mouths wide, each of them rooting for their own. Alvin grinned and told Camus to keep his jokes to himself. He tightened his grip on his opponent's hands and said that his words were true for ordinary goblins, but he was fighting with Alban, the general of these goblins. A mark suddenly lit up on his body. The general growled that the captain was now fighting the greatest warrior of the Belden tribe. The goblin roared and raised his hands in the air, which caused Camus to also refuse in the air. Alvin threw him into the air, which caused the orc to exclaim in amazement. Being in such a limbo, Camus asked in amazement how Alvin managed to do this. Without answering him, the general waved his hand and grabbed Camus's head, growling, after which he turned over in the air, ending up above him. Everything happened so fast that the audience did not even have time to understand. As a result, the captain's head crashed right into the stone. It happened because Alvin grabbed the captain's head and pressed down on it with all his weight. After that, he broke the captain's saber. Seeing that their general had won, all the goblins rejoiced. They took off and began to run excitedly to Alvin. They asked if Camus was dead. Sitting on the ground, Alvin grinned and said that it would not be so easy to kill the leader of the orcs. Camus began to come to his senses and coughed up blood. He croaked that he had lost to the captain. Without opening his eyes, he resigned himself to his fate and told General Alvin to end it. Hearing his words, Alvin got to his feet and grabbed an axe. He said that everything was just fine, because since he won, Captain Camus's life now belongs to him. Alvin exclaimed that he was not going to waste this life in vain. Upon hearing this statement, Camus's eyes widened in amazement. Having stopped paying attention to him, Alvin raised his axe and proudly exclaimed that the duel was now over. He exclaimed that his clan had won the war against Corvus. All the goblins of Alvin rejoiced even more and made a very loud noise on the island with their rejoicings. Alvin went up to the wounded hill and, scratching the back of his head, apologized to the head for starting to behave like that. Heel did not scold him in response and smiled. He said that this behavior is just very similar to Alvin. After that, Heel thanked Alvin for what he had done, and the general smiled back at him. Rihanna led Heel closer to the defeated Camus, and then Heel turned to the captain. Heel said he could stay on this island until he fixed his ship. Heel said that by the time the ship was repaired, Caillou's people would be able to get in order. He asked if the captain would agree to such a thing. Both the captain and his assistant stared at the young man in surprise. With his head down, Camus announced that he was accepting Heel's offer. Moving away from his defeated opponent, Alvin was surprised to find his daughter standing with her head down. She just turned to her father. After that, she suddenly kicked her father's leg with all her might. He jumped painfully and yelled. Stunned, Alvin asked why his daughter had hit him like that. Without answering anything, the girl leaned against her father, lowering her head. She sighed heavily and reminded Alvin that she had already told him not to get so hot anymore. But again, he did not obey her. At the same time, Captain Camus managed to recover and get up. He pointed at Heel sitting on a rock and shouted loudly to his subordinates to listen to him. Camus exclaimed that as long as they were here, they would obey Heel. The entire crowd of warriors immediately approached Hill to greet him loudly. That's how hundreds of soldiers of the Horde of Corvus became guests of the inhabitants of the island. But such a large number of guests made Heel a little worried, as well as Ash and Haney, who followed the orders of their queen and came to Lulul to serve him as the foster parent of little Lulul. Ash said it looked like the Beldan tribe had taken over Hill's command after all. He suggested that, in this case, Heel should give them new names, because now they serve him. The young man agreed and said that what they would receive in exchange would come from his label. So Heel did not know what the end result of the name change would be. Hill said that what he wants is to protect Leela. He decided that Ash would now be called Ashton, and Hain would be called Haynes. Both kobolds bowed their heads and exclaimed that they were swearing on their lives. After that, Heel sighed heavily and said that Valis seemed to be very busy. Vari smiled and agreed with his words, because he was checking the wounded and preparing new places for the guests to live. Suddenly, Heel felt intense pain and shuddered. Rihanna immediately excitedly jumped up to him, while the young man slowly sank onto the stone, holding his head with his hand. He sighed and tried to reassure the girl that he was fine and he was just tired. Not listening to his beliefs, Rihanna put her hand on his forehead anyway and exclaimed that Heel had a fever. Rihanna turned to Valis and said that she would take Heel to the room and asked that Valis take care of him after that. The goblin agreed and exclaimed that the girl could rely on him. A tired Heel turned to Rihanna and asked what she was doing, because he was all right. The girl replied with displeasure that Heel had worked too hard. Suddenly, she wrapped her arms around the uncomprehending youth and apologized to him. Hill asked, confused, what she was doing. Then Rihanna suddenly picked him up in her arms to carry him to the room to rest. Hill indignantly asked the girl about what she was doing. She replied that everything was fine and she would be able to carry him. The young man exclaimed that he wasn't talking about that at all. Captain Camus, who was watching this, giggled, covering his mouth with his hand. After that incident, Heel left all his command on Valis, and he was treated and rested to normalize his condition. Meanwhile, the goblins descended into the cave where the Leviathan defeated by Hill was located. Examining the snake's body, the goblins exclaimed enthusiastically that this beast was simply huge. One of the goblins turned to Valis and offered to just bury this Leviathan. Suddenly, Map approached the snake and carefully cut off a piece of it. Everyone was stunned to watch the Map eat this meat with gusto. After chewing this piece, Map jumped up and down contentedly and then reached for another one. The goblins noticed that Tom really liked the meat of Leviathan. Valis mumbled thoughtfully and then called 10 and 11 homers to him. After that, they began to freeze the cave to prevent the Leviathan from spoiling, because they could not even think that the meat of the snake would be edible until Map tried it. Having finished with this, the goblins decided to occupy a huge golem in the sea, which they needed to pull out. Suddenly, someone called out to them, and the goblins turned around. It was Captain Camus' team who offered them their help in this, because they had boats, and they also sailed well because they were pirates. The goblins of the island did not refuse and told the orcs to tie up the golem. Heel knew that, although it would not be easy, he wanted the Beldan tribe and the Horde of Corvus to put aside old grudges and start living in peace with each other. As it turned out, the core of the golem survived, and all thanks to Orichalcum, so Heel decided that he would need to restore that body, but first he had to take care of his own. Rihanna was sitting next to him and offering something with a smile. Heel raised his hand and said sheepishly that he was fine, and therefore he could eat by himself. Rihanna immediately replied to him that this was not the case, because Heel would not recover if he did not rest a lot. Rihanna handed him a spoonful of food and told him to open his mouth. In the end, Heel couldn't refuse her and obediently ate everything, thinking that Rihanna was more stubborn than it seemed at first glance. Despite everything, Heel was very grateful to her for taking such care of him, and the medicines Valis made for him from Yggdrasil leaves were very effective and helped him recover. Heel turned to Rihanna with a smile and told her not to force herself to do all this, because just a little more, and he would have enough mana to recover. The girl replied with a smile that she did not force herself to take care of him all day, because she was unlikely to have such an opportunity again. Rihanna turned away in embarrassment and began twisting a strand of her hair around her finger, saying that it was not difficult for her to help Heel, and even more so, she did not come to him so often. When the girl finished feeding him and was about to leave, Heel said that he realized that it was not difficult for her. He thought about the fact that he didn't really like the fact that he was resting while everyone was working. The young man looked at the wall where his pickaxe hung and thought that he really wanted to keep digging. At the same time, the goblins went down into the cave to dig. One of them told the other that this area was somehow too hot, raising the pickaxe to strike. He replied that it was true. And when the pickaxe touched the stone, water splashed into the goblin. He jumped aside, stunned. They were both surprised that there was water here. One of the goblins exclaimed that it was a real hot spring. Some time ago, Heel was sent to a god-forsaken island. There he managed to save a sinking ship, fought a powerful monster, Leviathan. He also learned the true value of friendship. But now he was facing the greatest enemy he had ever seen, and he was unlikely to win. Rihanna called out sharply to Hela in the cave. The young man immediately responded and excitedly asked what was the matter. Rihanna told him that this hot spring was really good. Stammering, the young man agreed and then yelled, stretching. Being in hot water, Rihanna said that her tribe had the same hot spring, and she washed in it every day. The girl quite declared that she liked it. The embarrassed Hill had to turn away, and he said he understood her. He almost completely immersed himself in the water so as not to see Rihanna, and wondered how it happened in the first place. It all started a week ago. Hill got tired of having to lie in bed all the time and just relax, so he decided to practice using a pickaxe. He swung the instrument and exhaled that everything was fine. Suddenly, the door to the room flew open. Just at that moment, Hill wanted to strike with a pickaxe, but he felt a strong pain in his side. The young man shrank and howled painfully. Everyone who came to visit him stood stunned on the threshold. Rihanna helped Hyle get back on the bed and sit down. Holding him down, she grudgingly reminded him that she had told him to stay on bed rest for now. Heel apologized awkwardly to the girl. Captain Camus stared disapprovingly at Heel and asked if he had been taught that girls should not be offended. Only then did the young man realize that Rihanna had not come alone, and said that it was a rather rare sight to see the captain here. Taking off his hat, Captain Camus explained to Hill that he was just passing by and decided to look in on him. He said that Rihanna was just showing the island to him and the kobolds who were now standing next to him. Camus leaned over to Rihanna and quietly reminded her not to forget something. The girl immediately realized what he was talking about and handed him something. Taking it in his hands, the young man immediately realized what kind of thing it was. He straightened it out and exclaimed that it was his clothes. He was pleased to say that even though it was pretty worn, it still looked like new. Smiling at his joy, Rihanna told him that these clothes had been restored with the help of spider threads, so now this thing will be even better than before. Continuing to inspect the clothes, Heel happily thanked Rihanna. After that, Ashton finally decided to start a conversation and said that, as it turns out, this island is full of different surprises. Kobold said that although this island is small on land, there are a large number of tunnels hidden underground, and blacksmithing is also very developed. Captain Camus said that he had been to many places, but he had never seen Yggdrasil. Sitting on the bed, Heel said that he could make this place even better for living, which is why he would welcome any suggestion or comment from the captain. He agreed to help him and said that the Horde of Corvus would make every effort to do so. He suddenly said that he and his people would be glad if Heel accepted them as residents of this island. The young man's eyes widened in surprise at this statement. Heel apologized to the captain and his people for the fact that the Belden tribe did not treat them well. The young man said that it was not Camus' fault, but despite this, reconciliation would take a long time. Kill said that he agreed to accept Camus and said that he could not worry about the relationship, because the entire Belden tribe obeys him, a man. The young man thought that soon the goblins would forget their grievances. Camus thanked him. Suddenly, the captain asked how a simple man, the ruler of the island, who is so kind to monsters, managed to create such a dominion here. Hill thoughtfully tugged at a lock of his hair and said that it was quite a long story. The young man said that he actually came from San Feliz, and this island belongs to the kingdom. Captain Camus was interested in the origin of the hill, and he wanted to ask about it, but at that moment someone ran to them and shouted that they were in trouble. It was Ree, out of breath from running, who leaned her hand on the wall to catch her breath. Hill became alert and asked what was the matter. The excited girl exclaimed that their hot water was running right out of the ground. After that, Hyle packed up and went down to the cave with the others, where this hot water appeared, which was mentioned by Ree. Seeing a small pond with steam rising from it, Rihanna gasped in admiration. Valis turned to Hill and asked how the young man was feeling. Heel replied with a smile that he felt pretty good, since now he was able to walk on his own and also come and look at this wonderful find. General L looked over the young man's shoulder and exclaimed joyfully that this was a hot spring that he already liked. The goblin even smiled in excitement and clenched his hand into a fist. Little Ree looked sullenly at her father and, putting her hands on her hips, said that he was very optimistic. The girl suggested that it might just be a cave flood and not an endless source. The goblins who found this water said that they were just digging, and then suddenly water came out of this place, which still did not stop pouring from the ground. Hill asked if they had ever had this before. Ree, who still did not believe that this was an endless source of water, said that they had had this happen before, but then there was not so much water. Heel decided that first he had to make sure that the water was not dangerous. Suddenly there was a loud splash, and water splashed in all directions. It was Map who, without worrying about anything, jumped into the water and began to wash himself quite well. Alex claimed that it wasn't fair. Valis said the water was good, especially since he had checked it before Heel's arrival. The young man squatted down by the water and turned to Map. He asked him if there was a way to get this water out. Valis mumbled thoughtfully and said that it would be possible if this source were in the mountains, but it is difficult to do it from underground. Heel drooped and said that it would really be difficult. Map suddenly came up with a solution to this problem. Heel thought that he definitely had a plan to get the water out, since Map quickly packed up and ran to his forge. After that, the inspired Map drew a plan on the ground for what he needed to do. After looking at the drawing, Heel realized that Map wanted to use the workshops to make molds out of stone and iron. The kobolds and Captain Camus stared dumbfounded at how Heel was doing something with an entire mountain of iron. The captain asked in surprise what was going on, and Heel told him that it was a routine inventory. Then the goblins melted this iron and carefully poured it into molds. Everyone was busy making iron pipes out of stone molds. At the same time, Map was busy improving the hands of numbers 8 and 9. Heel sighed in admiration and said that it was very similar to fire magic when a bright ray appeared from the improved arm. Watching the process, the young man realized that it connected the pipes, melting them. As a result, they began a large-scale project to bring hot water from the cave to the surface, in which everyone participated. Map and the others have created a sophisticated device to control the water supply so that they don't waste it. And they also built a huge swimming pool on the surface so that they didn't have to go down. Hybel would also like to do something and help everyone, but Rihanna always watched him, and when she saw Hybel pick up a pickaxe, a menacing smile appeared on her face. So the young man decided that his life was more expensive than his work. A week later, they finally brought the hot spring to the surface. Heel exclaimed admiringly that the pool turned out to be just huge. Scratching his chin, Camus agreed with him, but asked about where the water was. While everyone was crowding around the still empty bathhouse, Valis called out to Map, who was sighing heavily, wiping his forehead after hard work. The underground device that regulated the water pressure was powered by the wind of Golem number 10. At the command of Valis, Map signaled to another goblin, who began to turn the wheel from which the mechanism worked. Immediately after that, the statue, which stood in the bathhouse and looked very similar to Map, opened its mouth. All the people gathered stared expectantly at this statue and were awkwardly silent. Then Map ran to the gurgling statue. Running up to her, Mappa stood behind the statue and hit her on the back with all his might. As soon as he did, a whole fountain of hot water sprayed out of the statue's mouth. Everyone gathered immediately cheered. Hill clenched his hand into a fist and exclaimed that Map had done a great job. Then he added in a lower voice that the design of this statue was not very good. Ree sat down on the edge of the pool and sighed admiringly, looking down. The girl watched as the water was rapidly gaining. General Elvin bent down next to his daughter and exclaimed that he already wanted to jump into this water. Captain Camus, standing behind him, waved his hand with a smile and said that he was transferring the right to enter the water first to Alvin. He wanted to add that the Belden tribe deserved it, but did not have time. Alvin was outraged by his words, so he just pushed Camus into the water before he even had time to understand what had happened. Once in the water, the captain indignantly asked Alvin about what he was doing, but he no longer paid any attention to him and suggested to the jubilant comrades that they enjoy this hot spring. Then Alvin mockingly said that they should wash themselves first, because they shouldn't be like the orc that fell into the water. Camus again exclaimed indignantly that he had not fallen himself, but Alvin had kicked him. After they all washed up, the joyful goblins and orcs began to bathe in hot water. The adults were fairly showered with hot water, and the children joyfully jumped into the water from a running start. Alvin leaned back on the rocks and sighed in relaxation, saying that it was very good. Kamyu, who was sitting not far from him, agreed with the general's words and said that this water would even relieve exhaustion. Valis thanked Kamya for his help. Noticing that the captain does not react to Valis's praise in any way, Alvin asks Kamyu that something is wrong or that he simply does not like the fact that he was praised. Because, according to the general, building all this is just the work of muscular orcs. Kamyu casts a displeased look at the general and declares that Alvan is insulting the captain's body with his words. One of the assistants quietly turns to Alvan and awkwardly says that he shouldn't have talked about their leader's muscles. At the same moment, Captain Kamyu suddenly jumps on a rock and begins to pose proudly, shouting to everyone to pay homage to his beautiful body. At the same time, the kobolds wash Leela and tell her not to pay attention to them. Heel, who also decided to swim, took a towel and a wooden basin with him. When he saw that a whole crowd had gathered in the pool, he smiled and said that the day promised to be fun. Seal, as always, rode beside his master. The young man turned to his pet and asked if he also wanted to swim with them. At the same time, Alvin called out to Fundle and told her not to swim in the bathroom. She agreed, and then Heel flinched because he realized something. Turning his gaze to the pool, he noticed Fudgul, who turned to him and said that she thought that Heel had come there before everyone else. The young man realized that the pool was not divided, and therefore monsters of both sexes were bathing together. When Map was swimming in the water, a dark spot appeared around him. The goblins who were nearby asked what was going on with him. Killenleal turned to Varys and asked why the baths were not separated. He did not understand the young man. Heel sighed heavily and thought that Varys did not understand his question. Then, soft footsteps sounded on the stone behind the young man, and someone called out to Heel, making him start. It was Rhianna, who was also going to swim in the hot springs. Holding a towel and a ladle in her hands, she said that she would like to wash the back of the chair. The young man was struck by lightning, and he opened his mouth wide. One side of Hela assured him that he could swim with Rhianna, since the baths were not separated, but his other side said that he needed to share the baths, but he could take advantage of the opportunity since it was there. Heel argued with himself for a while, but then both sides came to an agreement, deciding that he should swim with Rhianna. The young man was angry that such bad thoughts flashed through his head and simply waved them away. He became nervous and began to quickly leave the pool, shouting to Rhianna that he was dizzy, so he would come to swim here later, and wished everyone a good time. Rhianna stared uncomprehendingly after the fleeing Hill. Hill turned his head to Seal and said with annoyance that Rhianna had scared him very much. The young man said that his pet could go to the baths with someone else, since Heel himself did not really want to swim in that place. He scratched his head and admitted that he actually wanted to swim too, but he thought it would be more like he was bullying Rhianna. After thinking about it for a while, Heel finally decided to go down into the cave and swim alone, except for Seal, in the hot spring that was there. When he reached the spring, he stepped into the water with one foot and then went completely in. He sat down in the water, leaning back against a stone, and said that this water was perfect. Seal also jumped into the hot water. The young man looked back at the mechanism they had created to supply water to the outside, and said that he never would have thought that they would have such a thing. Hill said that Mappa was indeed a genius, and praised number 10 for doing a good job. Suddenly, Rhianna appeared behind Heel, who said that she knew that the young man would be here. He was startled and fell face first into the water. Blushing completely with embarrassment, he turned to Rhianna and asked what she was doing here. The girl told him that she just couldn't leave him alone. Rhianna apologized to him with a smile for the behavior of others. She said that everyone is so excited and noisy because they haven't seen the hot spring for a long time. The girl said she had already realized that Hill wanted to enjoy it in silence. A little later, Rhianna asked Heel if he would mind if she disturbed his peace a little and joined him at the spring. Soon the girl was already bathing in hot water, and Heel, blushing from head to toe with embarrassment, turned away. He had met the greatest enemy he had ever seen. Heel met this enemy face to face. Rhianna suddenly pointed to the side and called out to Heel to look in that direction. The young man started in surprise and turned around sharply. Rhianna said that the ore shines like the stars in the sky. Deciding to calm his excitement somehow, Heel opened his inventory and began checking the contents. After studying everything, he noticed that they used too much iron to create pipes. Suddenly, Rhianna lowered her head and spoke softly to Heikel, pulling him out of his thoughts. The girl suddenly announced that she wanted to tell him something very important. Because of her words, Heel was even more scared and shuddered. The young man thought that her words sounded too suspicious, since Rhianna decided to tell him something important while they were alone. Then he thought that on the technical side, there was also Seal and number 10. The young man was scared. Rihanna was trying to say something, but she didn't know how, because she was hesitating and stuttering. Suddenly she said that she could not understand the feelings of the goblins of her tribe. She apologized to Hill and said that she knew that Captain Camus and the others were sorry for what had happened earlier, but despite this, her clan's home would always remain in their hearts, and there was nothing they could do to help. The girl smiled and said that they were now working together, eating together, and basking in the hot spring together, despite their past disagreements, so Rihanna was happy. Because of her words, Heel also lowered his head and smiled. He told the girl that she shouldn't apologize, because the past is always hard to let go. Heel asked if she wanted to further develop her tribe. The young man already knew that the answer was yes, so he said that it was good. He told Rihanna to look at the island, which had goblins, slugs, cave spiders, goblins, kobolds, 2 people who lived together. After his words, Rihanna suddenly pressed her back against the young man's back with a smile, which made him open his eyes in a daze. She thanked Heel from the bottom of her heart. The young man started up and blushed even more. He wanted to ask the girl what she was doing, but did not finish, because when he looked at the girl, he saw that she was sleeping there, leaning against his back. He stared at the sleeping girl in surprise. Suddenly, he remembered that Rihanna had used up a lot of mana, but despite this, she continued to work hard. Hill turned away from Rihanna and looked in front of him. Looking at the ceiling of the cave, he thanked Rihanna, who did not hear him, for everything she had done. Suddenly, the girl slowly opened her eyes and started up. She apologized to Hill and said she just fainted. In surprise, Hill recoiled from the girl and grabbed Seal. The heel was in the spring until it was boiled. After some time, perhaps because of the effect of the hot spring, but the reason was not particularly important to Hill, he recovered and was able to work. The young man swung the pickaxe, but did not feel any pain in his body. He wiped tears of happiness from his face, because now he could dig. Rihanna and Fungal stood at the door, smiling. But Fungal still didn't understand how Heel could cry over this. Captain Camus came into the house and congratulated Heel on his recovery. The young man turned to him and greeted the captain. He pointed a finger behind his back and winked at Hill, asking if he had an extra minute. When they both went outside, Camus looked at the view that extended from the hill they were on, and said with admiration that the view here was very beautiful. Camus turned to Hill and handed him the list. He said it was a gift for the young man in honor of his recovery. Hill accepted the gift and looked at it in surprise. Opening the scroll, the young man realized that this was Porte's plan. He asked Camus if he had created the list himself. The captain proudly stated that he had created this plan at the request of Valis. He asked him if it was possible to build a port on this land, so Camus made this plan. The captain said that, in addition, he had heard that Heel was going to trade with the outside world in the future, but the young man did not have ships. Heel replied with annoyance that they had broken all the ships that were broken into planks. After his words, Captain Camus pointed to his ship, which was located near the island, and said that they were ready to give their ship to Hill. Stunned, the young man asked if it was true. The captain confirmed his words and said that they would give the ship back, but Hill would have to repair the bottom of the ship, which was broken by Leviathan. This was another reason to build a port. Hill asked what the triangle that was drawn on the port's plan meant. Camus said that he got a little carried away and therefore designed the port plan a little, in the royal style. He marked with a triangle everything that could not be built. The young man considered the plan, thoughtfully stroking his chin. He said that the plan of this port is as good as the real royal port. Camus noticed that Heel knew what the royal raft looked like, so he asked if the young man was from the kingdom. He smiled a little grimly and confirmed the captain's assumptions. Hill has stated that he is the 17th prince of the kingdom of Sanfales. Since he was a complete loser, they got rid of him. After he told Rihanna everything, it became easier for her to talk about the past. Camus apologized to him for his question. The young man immediately raised his hand so that the captain would not think anything superfluous. He said that all he wanted to say was that this island was considered abandoned, and therefore the kingdom would not even look here, so he did not have to worry about it. Turning away from the captain, Heel thanked him with a smile for the gift, and then said that he would go and discuss the further plan of action with Valis and Map. Camus agreed with him. The captain silently looked after Hill, who was leaving, and the young man thought that Camus did not like his design very much. After that, they started building, and Heel laid the bricks with the help of his powers. Captain Camus watched the young man's work with his mouth wide open in amazement. Alvin patted him on the shoulder and laughed. He proudly exclaimed that their leader was very strong. As he continued to watch Heel move the huge bricks, Camus asked how the mark of the king of the cave was even capable of such a thing. After a while, Almost everything was already finished. Captain Camus admired the young man's work and exclaimed that it was amazing. He said that Hill had built a wonderful harbor. Hill turned to the captain and said that he could only lay the foundation for the port. He asked if he could assign further control of the port to Captain Camus. He pointed a stunned finger at himself, not believing that Hill had offered him this. Behind Camus' back, Valis exclaimed that everything would be fine, and he would succeed. Rihanna wished good luck to the captain with a smile, and Alvin made a displeased face. The captain turned in surprise in their direction. Turning back to Hyle, Camus struck his chest with his fist and exclaimed that he agreed to the young man's proposal, and he could rely on him. He exclaimed that he would build this beautiful port. Heel said with a smile that he would give these beautiful golems, which he pointed out, as assistance to the captain. The young man restored the numbers from the 1st to the 7th, which were destroyed by Leviathan. He exclaimed that he was glad to see them, and it was time for them to get to work. There was still plenty of stone for the construction of the port, so Heel decided to go down into the cave and dig. While he was digging, Fungal came up behind him. She exclaimed joyfully that Heel had finally returned to the caves. She asked why the young man was not using a mithril pickaxe, but an ordinary one. Heel thought that this was not necessary now, because he had enough of an ordinary pickaxe. Suddenly, Hill heard someone saying that it was dangerous for Liel to be here, so they shouldn't go any further. It was Ashton and Haynes, whose main job is to keep an eye on little Lilu. Hill awkwardly apologized to Ashton and asked them to take Leela away from here. After that, Fugel stood next to Haynes, who decided to stay here, and asked with a grin if he would dig with him now. The kobold picked up a pickaxe and said he wanted to try digging. The girl laughed and asked Haynes what kind of pickaxe he should use instead of a sword. Hill, standing nearby, called out to Fugel to calm down a little. Then the young man turned to Ashtan, who was standing behind him and watching what was happening, and asked him not to take offense at Fugale, because she is still a child. At the same time, Fungal was teaching Haynes. Kobold asked her about hitting with a pickaxe. The girl exclaimed that it was exactly like that. She pointed to the glowing spots behind the rock and said they meant there was something there. Heel watched the kobold's work from the side in surprise. Haynes was very strong because of his appearance, and therefore quickly got to the end. After that, Fungal decided to compete with Kobold in how much ore they would be able to dig up. They worked so hard that boulders flew in all directions. Heel smiled contentedly and slung a pickaxe over his shoulder, because now he could do his favorite thing. The young man just loved digging in the mines. While the second kobold was busy, Lilu jumped onto Ashtan's shoulder. Kobold apologized to Hill and said he needed to get back to his job. Suddenly, Lilu noticed something and jumped to the ground, and then began to bark at some stone. Haynes and Fuli were sitting in a pile of rocks that had been left behind after their hard work. Kobold laughed contentedly and said that digging turned out to be much more interesting than he thought. Fuli agreed with him and exclaimed that there were always plenty of ores here. Suddenly, Haynes, who was holding a pickaxe and had dug something out, called Heel. He exclaimed that he and Lilu had found something. Everyone immediately started up and looked in that direction. From the other end of the cave, Haynes exclaimed that he didn't know what it was. Fukali jumped up from her seat and shouted at Liel that she didn't have to go to that place. What Haynes and Leela found turned out to be some kind of incomprehensible device. Heel assumed it was some kind of orichalcum chest. Fuli exclaimed that she was sure it was a coffin and not a chest. Haynes said gloomily that all this was not good. He looked down at his feet and noticed some kind of strangely shaped stone there. The kobold took him in his paws and said that such stones had fallen out of that device. Hill exclaimed that it was something new, and then asked Haynes to give it to him. The system showed Hill that this unusual stone was a transfer stone that instantly moved to other transfer stones. The transfer distance depended on the size of the stone. Hill looked doubtfully at the transfer stone, stroking his chin. He asked how this stone could be used to transport himself to another. Then Fuli called out to Hila because she had found something. She was looking at the device they had just found, and found a hole on it that looked like a stone in Heel's hands. The girl suggested inserting this stone into the hole. Heel obeyed the girl and inserted the transfer stone into the hole. The stone fit perfectly in shape and size, and then suddenly lit up. Everyone who was there stared in shock. As a result, nothing terrible happened. Just the device where the stone was inserted also lit up. Fuli looked at the illuminated floor of this capsule and asked about where this thing leads. Ashtan replied to the girl that he would not advise them to go there themselves, even if this capsule really transfers to another stone. After that, everyone turned their backs on this capsule and began to discuss the find. Fully scratched her head and offered to send a golem there. Haynes agreed, but suggested that golems might not work there. They didn't notice the map at all. Heel began to turn back to the capsule and said that they needed to think more about what to do next. The young man turned around just at the moment when Map moved to another place with the help of the capsule. Everyone cried out in shock. After seeing how Map disappeared, Heel did not think long and rushed to the transfer capsule. He exclaimed that he was following Map, and he ordered the others to wait here. Haynes rushed after him and shouted that Hill should not do this. Suddenly, the stone lit up again, and all those gathered in this place who were about to run to save Map were struck by lightning. As a result, they all ended up in another place completely unfamiliar to them. Fuli frowned in displeasure and asked where they were. Hill muttered that he didn't know. He turned to Leela and asked if she knew where Map was, but she didn't know. After that, Hill went back to the capsule and began to enter it. He looked over his shoulder and said that he would go to check everything first because it didn't seem to be dangerous. He told Seal to call Valis. When Hill entered the capsule, Lilu also hurried after him and jumped into the capsule, barking cheerfully. Ful also ran to them and shouted that she would also go with them to look for Map. After that, both kobolds came to them, which were of considerable size. They were guards of Princess Lilu, so they had to protect her. Fungal tried to tell them to wait, because they all just wouldn't fit into the capsule, but it was too late. Ashtan, pinched, suggested to Haynes that he go after them. The latter agreed with his proposal. He tried to get out of the capsule backwards, but he got stuck. Lilu squeaked indignantly, and Fugal exclaimed that she was pinned down. Hill tried to calm down Leela, who was very loudly indignant. And then their capsule suddenly activated. Once transported to a completely different place, everyone fell out of the transfer capsule. They fell to the floor with surprised cries. Heel hit the floor painfully, and Lilu ended up on his head and suddenly started barking. Looking up, Heel saw that they were in a huge hall that was filled with bookcases. The young man began to get to his feet and gasped in surprise. He said admiringly that he had never seen something like this before. Fungal went to the bookcase and examined it. The girl said that there were a lot of books in this place, and then clarified whether they were exactly on the island. Hill looked down over the fence and swallowed hard. He said he thinks they are on the island because this place is similar to where he found the golems. The young man saw that the library had a lot of floors and said that it was scary. Looking around, Haynes turned to Hill and informed him that he had found the map they had come here for. Kobold added that Mappa needed help. Then Hill immediately became serious and told Haynes to take him to Map. The kobold led the young man past several bookcases. Hill noticed that some of them had been trashed because books were lying on the floor. When Haynes brought him to Map, Heel saw that he was lying on the floor in a pool of blood. He immediately rushed to Map and began shaking him, asking what had happened to him and who had injured him. Turning over the map, Heel saw that he was bleeding from the nose. Looking down, the young man saw a book with women on the floor, which Map was looking at. The young man blushed in embarrassment and abruptly slammed the book shut, saying that he just needed to forget about it. Closing the book, he began to treat Map at the same time. After that, Map finally came to his senses and sat on the floor, scratching his head. Hill turned to him and said that they needed to go back, because they were all worried about him. Suddenly, Map jumped to his feet and began to look around. Looking down, Map found a book on the floor, which depicted ancient symbols. The caveman took the book in his hands and examined it, and Heel called him to follow him. After that, Map thoughtlessly threw the book back, straight down. Turning back, Heel saw that Seal had returned and brought with him a whole crowd of help. The young man asked the pet in surprise if he had brought everyone with him. At the same time, Valis discovered a book and picked it up. He called out to Heel and said that this book was a wonderful find. Hill walked over to the goblin and bent over the book he had found. Examining it, Valis mumbled in disappointment and said that, unfortunately, he did not know what language this book was written in. Hill muttered that he couldn't read the book either. Suddenly, Captain Camus appeared behind Heel, who clenched his hand into a fist with joy and exclaimed that this adventure was very exciting. The captain really liked everything, including the teleportation device they used, the huge library, as well as the remains of an unknown civilization that lie underground on this island. Kamya was very pleased with this adventure. He shifted impatiently from one foot to the other and suggested exploring the library. Hill agreed and said they would split up into groups to explore. He warned everyone to be careful because there might be golems here. After that, they split into 3 groups and began to wander around the library. They looked around with interest. While Heel was examining some armor, Fungal was trying to get a book from the shelf, but then Rihanna did it instead. After opening this book, Rihanna called out to Hila because there were pictures in that book. After examining the picture, Hila exclaimed that everything was drawn in great detail on it. Rihanna confirmed his words and said that the drawing was very beautiful. Bending over the book, Hila suggested that this city could have been here before them because the young man had already found similar structures on the island before. Fully jumped up to them and looked at the book. Rihanna drew attention to the mountain in the center. The girl pointed her finger at the mountain that towered above all the other structures in the drawing and said that that mountain looked just like their island. Fully looked at this mountain doubtfully and said that this mountain was different from their mountain in size. Rihanna laughed and said that their island looked much friendlier. He turned back and saw Seal there, looking up. Hill and his group approached Sanel, who just froze in place and looked up. The young man asked him about what had happened. Everyone raised their heads and looked where Seal was looking. As it turned out, there was a huge statue of a woman holding a scepter in her hand. Rihanna enthusiastically said that the statue was very beautiful and suggested that it was a goddess. Continuing to look at the statue in surprise, Heel said that once the people who lived here worshipped this goddess, who was now depicted here in the form of a statue. After that, they continued walking past the entire bookshelves. Heel thought that even in his kingdom there were no records of these ruins and assumed that no one had found this place before them. On the way back, they extracted a couple of magic stones and heart stones from the remains of the golem here and gathered into one group again. But despite all this, they have not found any information about these ruins. Valis really wanted to study the books from there and took about a dozen of these books with him, loading Seal up, so Heel could hope that Valis would find something. Valis himself said that he was not sure that he would succeed. Suddenly, Fungal felt something and turned towards the wall. Without saying anything, the girl hit the stone wall with a pickaxe. It became clear from the sound that there was some kind of room behind the wall, so Fungal called out to Heel and informed him that there was a passage behind the wall. After that, they looked around carefully, but did not find anything like a passage. Fungal impatiently held her pickaxe in her hands and asked if she could dig already. Heel himself did not feel any magical energy there, but the light told him that there was an ideal place behind that wall. The young man pointed with his hand to Fula where she should dig and said that he would protect her with his magic if something happened. At his command, Fugle swung. Then she slammed the pickaxe against the wall with all her might, so that only one blow was enough to break through it. Haynes exclaimed that Fungal had made a good shot. She laughed contentedly and walked over to the hole in the wall that she had made. Looking inside the secret room, she froze in surprise. Suddenly, she took off and ran straight into that room. Hill followed her and also froze in surprise. When he saw what Fugle had found, he smiled and congratulated her. There was a small pedestal in that room, on which there were 3 objects. Taking one of them in her hand, Fugle exclaimed that these were stones of change, which there were at least 3 here. After they visited that mysterious place and found the stones of change, every day, as soon as the sun appeared from behind the sea rocks, Funale woke up. She sat up sleepily on her bed and tried to come to her senses. Then she came down from the 2nd floor of the bed where they slept together with Rihanna. While Ful was getting out of bed, Rihanna was still sleeping sweetly and snoring in her sleep. After coming down, Fundle began to pack and get dressed. She braided her hair and then threw her vest over herself. As soon as she was ready, she immediately went down into the caves. As she went down the stairs, she called Golem number 15 after her. No one else in their community was so worried about digging. Like Funkel herself, absolutely every day she went to the mines, while the others were still asleep. Fochel was also the last to leave the mines. Coming to the mines in the morning, Heel noticed every day that Fulla was already there, and judging by how much she had dug up, it had been a long time. Scratching his head, he ordered the golem that was with Fundle to take the girl out of there and take her outside, because Heel was very worried about how tired she was. After the golem grabbed Fungal tightly, she frowned with displeasure, because she was distracted from her work, and Heel himself didn't even know what Fungal really wanted. After some time, they gathered together in the forest at the same table. Someone asked if this stone really allows you to evolve from an ordinary monster into another. Rihanna, who was also there, said that it was true because she herself managed to evolve with the help of this stone. Everyone gathered at the table. Kellis, Kobolds, Map, Valis, Camu, Elvin and Fugole, as well as Lilu, Terran and Seal. After Rihanna's words, Camu looked at the stones in surprise, because he always thought that this was Rihanna's real appearance. Feudal told the captain that their Princess Rihanna used to be an ordinary goblin, and not such a beauty. The kobolds stared and asked if it was true. The captain was surprised again when he heard that Rihanna was a princess. He asked if it was true. With a puzzled expression on his face, Camus said that he used to think that Rihanna was an elven princess who ran away from her home with Hybel. At his statement, Rihanna and Hill choked on their drinks and blushed. Hill indignantly asked the captain what he was talking about. The young man confusedly said that he had already told the captain that in fact it was not like that at all. He smiled contentedly and said that he was amused by the way Rihanna and Hill reacted to his words. Clearing his throat, Hill still hadn't stopped blushing and turned the conversation to another topic, saying that he didn't expect them to find 3 stones of change at once. The young man said that they would definitely give one of these stones to Fungal, who was now sitting at the table with a satisfied expression on her face, despite the fact that she was worried. Hill said that one stone was for her, because she was the one who found them. After thinking about it, Hill turned his gaze to Valis and said that the second stone would be his, if he did not mind. Valis, sitting silently at the table, shuddered at his words. He was surprised that they decided to spend 1 stone on him. Valis said that it is not worth doing this, and he thinks that there is a more suitable candidate for this role to evolve. He stretched out his hand, which made his mark visible to everyone on his palm. Hill replied that he insisted on it, especially since his Wizard King mark was currently idle. Upon hearing about the mark of the Wizard King that Valis had, Camus started up and exclaimed that it was the strongest mark. Ashton agreed and muttered that this mark is very strong and useful if you find the right use for it. Suddenly, General Elvin spoke up and called out to Valis. Scratching his head, he said that Valis was already old, so he could evolve with the help of the Stone of Change and get a new and young body. When she heard that Valis had already become, Fulanel asked in fright if he was dying. Rihanna took up her words and exclaimed that she did not want Valis to die. He said regretfully that he was already too old. The words of Alvin, Rihanna, and Feudal betrayed his resolve, so Valis suddenly started talking about how, despite his old age, he still wants his mark to be useful to them. Clenching his hand into a fist, Valis confidently turned to Hill with a smile and asked him to let him use the stone to evolve and become younger. As a result, they distributed 2 stones, but there was a third one left, for which there was no owner yet, because it did not look at all like someone wanted to evolve themselves. The kobolds refused the stone, saying that they could still use their marks for now, so evolution was not required. Valis turned to Camus and asked if he had a mark, because he would like to see it. The captain began to take off his glove and said that he also had a mark. Taking off his glove, he showed everyone the mark on his hand. Valis exclaimed in surprise, and Hill muttered that he had never seen such a mark before. Valis explained to the young man that this is a mark, a sea dragon that allows you to control the water. Valis tells us that he has heard that only new Chuets can use this mark. Hill opened his mouth in surprise when he realized that this mark turns into a monster. Hurriedly putting the glove back on his hand, Camus asked them to let him explain everything. He said that he did not want to use this label, even though there was evolution. General Alvin turned to Camus, surprised that he did not want to use the mark. Alvin said that from the description of the tag, he realized that Camus could be an ideal sailor. He said sarcastically that Al had funny jokes. Camus put his hand to his forehead and dramatically exclaimed that monsters had disgusting slippery scales, so he did not want to become like them. Hill awkwardly decided that it was better for him not to force the captain to evolve. As a result, they unanimously decided to carry out both evolutions immediately, in the same clearing where they drank tea. Fungal impatiently stood in the center of the clearing, and everyone else stood at some distance from her. Fungal picked up her change stone and said she was a little nervous. The girl turned to Rihanna, who was standing nearby, and asked what she should do, because Rihanna had already gone through this, so she knows what to do. The princess immediately roused herself and told Fula to just think about who she really wanted to become, and wanted it very much. Rihanna clenched her hands into fists, sincerely rooting for Fule, and wished him luck. Following Rihanna's advice, Funnel calmed herself down and, closing her eyes, thought about what she wanted and who she wanted to become thanks to the Stone of Change. Funkel remembered that she was always, absolutely all the time, protected by someone. Whether it was Heel, her father, or Rihanna, someone was protecting her anyway. The girl thought that someday everyone would leave her, and she would be left alone, unable to protect herself. Fungal pulled out the Stone of Change on her hands. It suddenly lit up and rose into the air. Fundle thought that she was the daughter of the great Elven himself, so she simply could not be weak and unable to protect herself. The power of the stone that activated was so strong that a wind blew that blew everyone away. When everything stopped, everyone opened their eyes, which were filled with surprise as soon as they saw what had become of Fubal. As the kobolds opened their mouths in shock, Captain Camus muttered that this couldn't be happening. Heel immediately turned away and covered his eyes with Mappe's hand so that he would not see Fugel. With a smile, the young man told Rihanna to do everything necessary. She immediately agreed and took the white dress in her hands. Having evolved, Fugel opened her eyes and made a surprised sound. After examining herself, she said that her arms and legs were longer now. Because she had evolved, her feet were now completely bare. Fugel looked at herself in surprise and scratched the back of her head. She was glad that the Stone of Change had really worked on her. Now the girl has become much taller and more beautiful, and her arms and legs have stretched out. Rihanna went up to her and carefully put a dress on Fugel. The princess asked her if she wanted to see her new self. To do this, they had Sie, who stretched out and looked like a mirror. When Fugel saw herself, her eyes widened in surprise. Suddenly, she rushed to hug Rihanna enthusiastically and cheerfully shout that she had succeeded, and now she too had evolved. Rihanna hugged her back and congratulated her with a smile that Fugel had evolved. Alvin went up to his daughter and examined her busily. Crossing his arms over his chest, he said that everything turned out well, because his daughter became bigger and faster. But he could not say the same about strength. Fugel said that she was not thinking about muscles, but about magic. After saying that magic was important to her, Fugel suddenly remembered this and excitedly asked if she could use magic now. Heel examined Fugel carefully and told her not to worry about magic, because he sees mana flows in the girl, so she just had to learn spells. Fugel was glad that she could use magic now. Looking at her hands, she said that her skin color remained the same, unlike the color of the princess's skin, at first not giving it much importance. Suddenly she realized that their skin colors were really different, and asked Rihanna about it. Fugel asked about why the princess had become human-like. When Fugel started talking about it, Rihanna suddenly started up, and Heel looked at her in surprise. Rihanna lowered her gaze, completely blushing with embarrassment. Stammering, she said she didn't know the reason for it. She said she thinks everyone's evolution is individual. Hill stroked his chin thoughtfully and said that it could be. After they dealt with the evolution of Fugel, Valis approached them, who held his Stone of Change in his hand. He said that changing the Fugel meant that he might get a different body. Rihanna cheered him loudly and told him that it was his turn. Immediately after that, the stone shone brightly along with Valis, who was holding it. When it was over, everyone stared at Valis in surprise. Fugel put her hands on her hips and asked what happened. When the dust cleared, Valis examined himself carefully. He was silent for a while and then said that something strange had happened because nothing had happened to him. Valis touched himself with his hands again to make sure that he hadn't really changed. Camus stared at him in puzzlement and asked why nothing had changed in the end. Suddenly, Valis started and froze in place. His body shook, which caused him to lose his grip and drop his cane. Everyone exclaimed in amazement and asked what it was.